Morning, just a sound check for everybody. Good seeing everybody. We're just admitting some more people into the meeting, and we'll be with you shortly. Well, good morning, everybody. Welcome to the session. Glad to see all the faces this morning. We've been looking forward to some time to this great event, proudly being hosted by Global Trade Solution. And we're just admitting more people into the session. A lot of people are coming in. But while we're doing that, let's do a little bit housekeeping. And please remember to keep yourselves on mute during the questions and answer session. At the end, we will then give opportunity to share your screen even and to unmute yourself and to ask questions to the panelists. You're also welcome to use the chat room where you can keep an eye on discussions and share contact details, say hi to each other. And also you can then post questions there for the panelists should you not choose to ask your questions. So either way, you're most welcome to participate freely. Ladies and gents, I would like then to put up our program for today. And bear with me, I've got a little bit challenges here with the technology this morning. We're using a new studio, but we'll get in and we will work through it, no problem at all. So there's our program for today, and we're talking supporting South African exports, and it's the 21st of September 2023. You can see we're proudly being hosted by Global Trade Solution, and ladies and gents, as you might have noticed, that all our events are complimentary and the related content on the web is complimentary. So we'd like to give recognition to all our alliance partners and the sponsors of the Transport Forum, for the kind of support they're giving us, the different levels of support, being as Industry Alliance or a gold sponsor or a platinum sponsor. So different levels of support we have, and let's give recognition, but also take note that we're going to do, and you can see the middle green bar there, the comfort break and spring quiz, and then at the end you can see spring quiz number 2. So Global Trade Solution, our host for today, kindly offering prizes for lucky winners, and this prize, each prize is a box of wine. And what we're going to do is, during that quiz, we're going to ask you a question about our sponsors. And the first person answering the question right in the chat room, that person will be the winner of the prize and a box of wine. And Audrey Ennen from Global Trade Solution will be in contact with you to determine your preference in terms of your selection of wines. So this is a great prize, and we thank Global Trade Solution also for this great prize they're making available to our winners. So please listen carefully as we go through this, because this might help you to answer the question right. So ladies and gents, we have formal industry alliances with the Transport Forum, and we're quickly going to work through them. Any member of these organizations and the sponsors, you're welcome to interrupt me should you feel you want to say a few words yourself about the organization, else I'll continue doing the work. Also would like to proudly announce, you can see there that the Safer Stops Association has been added this week to the Transport Forum as the Industry Alliance, formal Industry Alliance. So we're proud also and welcoming them on board. But let's work through our sponsors and alliance partners. So here we've got Global Trade, South African Bus Operators Association. You can see they represent the bus and coach industry for many years already in association with the Transport Forum. Thank you very much, SABOA, for your kind support. We've got the South African Association of Freight Forwarders. You can see they've already been established in 1921. It's a national association with members throughout the Republic of South Africa, representing all the freight forwarders, and they also shared a video with us. So let's have a look at this video.
What does it take to compete on the world stage? To go head-to-head with the best of the best? Excellence, agility, resilience, the willingness to keep on evolving. It takes courageous leadership to be bold and chart the course, to connect the dots, bringing stakeholders together, to overcome the hurdles we all face, and to deliver best practice. It's about business at the click of a button, delivering at the speed of the internet, connecting people, products, and places, strengthening our supply chains, faster and more cost-effective than ever. Since 1921, we've given voice and vision to the freight forwarding industry, navigating the tides of international trade, evolving ever more sophisticated supply chains, bridging local and global markets to move our economy forward. Welcome to our world. The South African Association of Freight Forwarders, Architects of Transport. for over a century.
Thank you very much, Soph. So we also got South African Express Parcel Association, or SAPA, and you can see that the represented body and the voice of the express delivery industry in South Africa. Thank you very much, SAPA. We've got the Road Freight Association. They say without trucks, South Africa stops. You can see green, smart, safe, legal and freight. Thank you very much, RFA, for your kind support. Then we've got the Africa Rail Industry Association. They're rethinking rail and connecting Africa. So the association, preeminent body in South Africa, representing players in the railway industry, also doing great work in terms of third-party access and actually revitalizing our rail infrastructure in our country. Thank you very much, Aria, for your good work you're doing. And as I said, Safer Stops Association joined us, uniting minds, sharing vision and resources, uplifting well-being, boosting road safety for South Africa's commercial drivers. Thank you very much, Safer Stops. We've also got media alliances, formal media alliances. There's many others, but these are informal alliance with the Transport Forum. And we're looking at freight news and features for import and export decision makers, all about logistics news. Ladies and gents, you need to subscribe to these magazines, otherwise you're obviously missing out big time. Thank you very much. Freight News, part of the Transport Forum, actually since inception. We've got a Railways Africa magazine, African continent specialist trade, technical business-to-business online publication, covering all aspects of the rail sector. Thank you, Railways Africa magazine. And Engineering News. It's from Crema Media, premier source of real economy news, and they also shared a video with the latest news captured.
Hello and welcome to this week's edition of the Engineering News and Mining Weekly magazine, published on Friday, 22 September 2023. In this week's cover article, Engineering News and Mining Weekly Senior Deputy Editor Skulk Burger reveals how funding has increased for small business energy solutions as the investment case improves. Different renewable energy, energy storage, and generator solutions can partially address small businesses' energy-related challenges, and funding to install such solutions in small businesses is increasing as the investment benefits for all parties become better understood. The Engineering News features focus on hydrogen fuel cells and the green economy, where the hydrogen vision paves the way for green technology transformation. And heating, ventilation, air conditioning and refrigeration, where the phasing out of HCFCs in air conditioning units continues. The Mining Weekly features focus on a preview of the Joburg Indaba, which is set to address key mining industry challenges. And Mining in Zambia, where an explorer commences a soil sampling campaign. This week's business leader is Heidi Ziervogel, head of New Ways of Working at Nedbank. And as this week's cartoon shows, the collapse in the performance of Transnet is well documented. The state-owned freight logistics group has been left broke and broken, and there are growing indications that it too will be seeking some form of bailout at some point. We hope you enjoy this week's edition of Crema Media's Engineering News and Mining Weekly. Be sure to subscribe to the magazine that offers you in-depth news about developments in the real economy by emailing subscriptions at engineeringnews.co.za. Happy reading and see you next time.
Thank you very much, Engineering News. Ladies and gents, let's give our sponsors. The first one I'm introducing you here is our platinum sponsor, Crystal by Ctrack. Ctrack being part of the Transport Forum also since inception. You see they're a leading provider of innovative telematic solutions, and they've got this Crystal software platform that offers scalable modules that empower businesses to expand and succeed. These include video and camera surveillance, advanced analytics capabilities, and planning and EPOD, all in one platform. Also accessible from mobile devices. And they shared a video with us. Have a look at this great product.
lot has changed in the 4 decades that we've been keeping vehicles and business equipment safe and always visible. And we've learned a thing or two along the way. That's why our focus is firmly on the future. A future that goes beyond just tracking and reporting, challenging the status quo, and exploring what the power of technology combined with AI can unlock for your business. Because talking did not earn us the reputation of being the leader in fleet telematics solutions. Pushing boundaries with constant innovation did, and putting our customers first by asking, what if, what's next, and what's possible? For the power of foresight over hindsight to plan ahead and make smarter decisions. What if you could predict the optimal route to increase on-time deliveries and significantly reduce long-term maintenance? What if you could predict the best tractor speed on the day to reduce wasted spray and cover more ground with precision? Or if something as trivial as a few centimeters could predict the difference between maximum efficiency or maximum risk? Because in our world, and likely in yours too, having insights that can be used as foresight with a crystal clear view of the future is the only thing that matters to remain ahead for better control, better efficiencies, and better overall performance. It's the telematics and AI solution that goes beyond tracking and reporting. Step into the future with Crystal by Ctrack and experience the power to predict.
Thank you, Ctrack. Ladies and gents, we can just try and fix the screen sharing that's giving me a hard time here. There we go, that's better. All right, so our host for today, Global Trade Solution. You can see innovative solutions transforming the global supply chain. And Magda Hugo just now is going to tell a little bit more about this great organization. Thank you, GTS. So we've got a gold sponsor as well, University of Johannesburg, their Department of Transport and Supply Chain Management. So they've got the School of Management within the College of Business and Economics at the University of Johannesburg. And they've been also part of the Transport Forum since inception. Thank you very much, UJ. We've got Standard Bank. Standard Bank, you can see over 160 years of experience. They believe that dreams matter and that together we can make them a reality. Thank you very much, Standard Bank, for your gold sponsorship. Then we've got a video from Standard Bank. Let's see if this one is going to work.
Equator Principles, which helps to protect our environment. We want to make sure that we're investing in infrastructure. We want to make sure that we're deepening financial services so that more and more people have access to financial services.
You can never provide a full service offering to the clients if you don't do so on the basis of an integrated Standard Bank offering, i.e. a universal bank. When we look at types of projects and companies and individuals that we find, we have to be sensitive to the impact that they make on those communities. Do they contribute meaningfully? Are they ethical in their own behavior? Are they sensitive to issues of environment? Are they sensitive to the way they undertake and develop their own projects and initiatives? And Standard Bank believes very, very strongly in ensuring that ultimately the growth that we desire is a growth that benefits everyone.
We finance the building of airports, bridges, ports, which contribute to economic growth and contribute to the hard infrastructure that society needs for development.
How do we show up in such a way that is real and human in our customers? And it goes both ways. How do we see customers as individuals, but how do we also show up not as a monolithic bank, but as a human bank, as a local bank? And you might say that is a bit of a paradox because we're a universal bank. It's true, but we are a universal bank that feels local, that feels real.
Countries in Africa embrace democracy, embrace good macroeconomic policies. They will attract foreign capital, into their economies. And we as a group are well positioned to access those capital flows and also help drive investments in the right sectors.
Thank you so much, Standard Bank. Ladies and gents, we've got Bid Cargo, another gold sponsor of us, fulfills the needs of the express cargo industry for daytime and overnight cargo capacity across comprehensive Southern and East Africa footprint. Let's have a look at their video.
In the world of express freight, there's one name that stands above the rest: Bid Air Cargo. Our airport-to-airport line haul service is the backbone of South Africa's express freight industry. At Bid Air Cargo, we don't just deliver cargo. We go the extra mile to ensure a seamless and efficient experience in South Africa. With our unwavering commitment to excellence and improved technology, we handle your cargo with utmost care and deliver it on time, every time. Our dedication to service excellence is what sets us apart. We live by our core values of service excellence, mutual respect, integrity, and accountability. When you choose Bid Air Cargo, you're choosing a partner that takes pride in going above and beyond for your freight needs. From pharmaceuticals to perishable goods, automotive parts to live animal transportation, we handle a diverse range of commodities. Our attention to detail and precision ensure that your cargo arrives in perfect condition, no matter what it is. Our dedicated teams work tirelessly to guarantee the safety and efficient transport of your cargo. We leave no stone unturned to ensure your freight arrives at its destination intact and on time. With our advanced track and trace system, you can monitor your shipments in real time. Stay informed about the whereabouts of your cargo with just a few clicks. Our goal is to provide you with peace of mind and complete transparency throughout the entire journey. We understand that time is of the essence for our valued customers. That's why we offer a user-friendly online portal that simplifies the documentation process. Obtain quotations and create e-labels with ease, saving you valuable time and effort. Whether you have a small package or a large shipment, Bid Air Cargo handles it all with equal care and precision. Our ISO certification is a testament to our commitment to quality and professionalism. We don't just excel in domestic express freight, we also cater to your international cargo needs. No matter the size of your business, whether you're a small enterprise or a multinational corporation, you can trust us to handle your cargo with the same level of dedication and attention to detail. Connect with us today and discover the difference our innovative technology, seamless tracking, and customer-oriented approach will make to your operation. Bid Air Cargo, same-day express every day, overnight express every night.
Thank you, Bid Air Cargo. Ladies and gents, we've got Pegasus, a multidisciplinary strategic management consulting group. You can see they focus on cities, climate, energy, resilience, transport, waste, and water. So in South Africa, we leverage our sector-leading expertise and experience to craft and implement mobility solutions which work and have substantial impact. Thank you very much, Pegasus, for your gold sponsorship. Unitrans Supply Chain Solutions, innovation, expertise delivered. See, they're leading provider of integrated transportation, warehousing, and supply chain-based services and customers with a variety of needs, offering bespoke value propositions in each segment. Thank you very much, Unitrans. JC Auditors, compliance and certification, one solution. As you can see, they are SANAS accredited certification body providing internationally recognized certifications. Also very much involved in the road transport management system, all about compliance. So important also self-regulation, which is becoming more and more popular. Compliance is paramount to be self-regulated. Right, we've got professional risk and asset management. You can see they do warehouse process analysis and risk management, stock in transit risk management, warehouse and transportation surveillance and security solutions, logistic risk analysis consulting. Right, they've got stock loss investigations, logistics, data mining. Thank you, Professional Risk and Asset Management, for your gold sponsorship. Easy Clear, software solutions for customs clearing, freight forwarding, and logistics providers covering air, sea, road, and rail. So a leading software provider for the customs and clearing industry. Thank you very much, EasyClear. So the Ticket Pro, we've got Ticket Pro Group. It's actually sponsoring two brands with the Transport Forum. This one is the Ticket Pro Travel. You can see it's a very convenient online booking tool for all your corporate needs. No hidden fees, no contracts, straightforward, fair pricing. You can see they've got a Traveler Protector, Business Guardian, and cutting-edge innovation. So yeah, it's an online corporate travel booking tool with everything you need and nothing you don't want. Thank you, Ticket Pro Travel. So we also have Ticket Pro Smart Tab. See, this Smart Tab system includes key features like comprehensive route management, flexible passenger payment methods, flexible route and fare product setup, shift and dispatch management, cashier system, inspection tools, and comprehensive MIS tools. Thank you, Ticket Pro Smart Tab. Zutari, also presenting today, with Yolanda Fourie. You can see Zutari, they say impact is engineered, consulting engineers of note, previously known as Oricon. Zutari, thank you very much for your co-sponsorship for many years. Transport Forum, proud to be associated with the Zutari brand. We've got Kubot, they say they're transforming ticketing as part of the ICN Mobility Group, which enables public and private transport to move into the digital era. Journey planning, smart ticketing, streamlining electronic payment, all right, shaping the digital transformation of the mobility sector. Thank you very much, Kuba, for your sponsorship. All right, now we've got just an attention to this event, Smarter Mobility Africa, ladies and gents, 1st to 3rd of October at the Gallagher Estate. Really worth your while to support this and attend this event. And this exhibition, the Transport Forum is also going to have a stand there, so come and visit us. We're glad to see you there. Thank you very much, Smarter Mobility Africa, supporting the Transport Forum. So, ladies and gentlemen, these are our sponsors. We can give a big hand to our sponsors for making the Transport Forum possible. And yeah, and also sharing content with the rest of the industry complementary. Thank you very much to our sponsors. Just to draw your attention to our popular business directory, ladies and gents, Olga Mashilo from Boleng Bontle Consultant. We've outsourced this to a company as a BEE initiative as well. And it's very well categorized. We're getting very good feedback. It's only 450 rands per year to be listed here. And Olga will contact you. You can take a number down there and you can contact Olga to get your company listed. You guys will also receive an email after this event requesting your feedback. And in that email, you'll also have the opportunity to indicate whether you want Olga to be in contact with you. Thank you very much, Olga, also for administrating this for us. So, ladies and gents, the presentations you see today will be uploaded to this website for download, and just admitting more and more people to our event here. So that transportseek.com, ladies and gents, when you visit that website, you can go to the downloads feature, events downloads, I'll show you now. And then once you've logged in, you can download presentations. And actually, it's presentations presented at the Transport Forum over the past 16 years, more than 900 of them. Very strong knowledge base, and it's all complimentary, so you can download that. So once you go to that website, you see on the left of your screen a user login. So you do not have your account yet, you can create your own complimentary account by clicking on sign up. And then you go through the simple little process, confirm your email address, and then in this process, you add it to the Transport Forum's distribution list or mailing list. You should not be there yet. That's the deal, complimentary content that we can keep you posted. Thank you for having us in your inbox. So once you've signed up and you signed in, then you can go to events and select downloads. And once you've done that, you can go to the little search engine. You'll see there are two ways that you can search for presentations. The one method is that you use the top field that top field, you find by title description. You can type in any title like logistics or smarter or whatever, and you hit search, and it will search through all the presentations with that in the topic or a person's surname, and it will bring it up. Or you can go to category, select the day's date, hit search, and it will bring up all the presentations presented on that day. So ladies and gents, that's now our housekeeping. I would like to bring us now back to our program for today. Supporting South African exports, 21st of September 2023. And I would like to give our host, Magda Yigu from Global Trade Solution, to do the formal welcome. Thank you very much, Magda.
Good morning, everybody, all the industry partners and colleagues. Thank you, Harry, for the introduction. And yeah, introducing all the exciting stakeholders that's a part of your team. So yeah, today we would just like to welcome everybody to the session, and thank you for the opportunity to be the host of the session today. I think from an introduction perspective, so maybe just to flight the agenda, we've got some very exciting topics that we will be discussing today. I think it's wonderful to see what processes and procedures basically in place for us to enable a more simplified export and import process within our international trade. So we look forward to all the presentations today. So from the presentations, we've got Arno van Niekerk, we've got Jolandi Fourie, then myself that will be talking about AEO, and then we've got Werner and then Anton Eccles also. So today's session, really, we want to focus, as I said, on making the tools available in the international trade to enable and simplify the procedures, especially when it gets to imports and exports. We know we have several challenges in this space, and obviously just see how we can leverage off that, what's available to make this a better, or simply better, faster process. I would just like my colleagues, Anton, Helen, and Audrey also just maybe to put their cameras on, just from an introduction perspective. So I'm just going to share the slide. Just enable me to share. Sorry, Harry, I didn't see that I could not share. There we go. Thank you. So in the room with me today, I've got Anton Eccles, who looks after our innovation. I've got Helen that looks after our content management, and I'll explain it a bit better. And then we've got Audrey that looks after our branding and overall compliance from our branding perspective. So I'm just trying to see where the full slide is. Perfect. So who are we as GTS? So we can be seen in three pillars, basically. So we look after consultancy and strategy, just really looking after the international trade compliance, doing the necessary research, specifically from a country perspective, looking at risk and just ensuring that basically best business practices apply to your business, being our client. And then from a solutions perspective, we develop and maintain our own solution that will enable importers and exporters to trade, and obviously allowing integration with all the necessary government authorities and partners within the trade. And then lastly, we've got specialized services. We also provide clearing and forwarding services. We look after content, which we have introduced Helen. She looks after our tariffing and our country of origin and valuation requirements, making sure that all those statutory information is always up to date. And then, we have an in-source and outsource solution for this trade. And then, that's basically any other outsourced services within the international trade. So thank you for that introduction. So basically, Harry, then we'll go to the next item on the agenda.
Indeed, we will do that. Thank you very much, Magda, for that introduction and also supporting the Transport Forum. We really appreciate that. So, ladies and gents, our first presenter then today is Dr. Arno van Niekerk. He's an economist and senior lecturer at University of the Free State, He's going to talk about the building blocks for an export-driven economy. Thank you very much, Anton. Arno, thank you very much for supporting us.
Thank you so much, Harry. I just want to, are you going to share my slides or should I?
I can do it for you.
Excellent. Thank you so much. So good morning, everybody. Thank you for the opportunity. It's so good when academe and private sector and, even public sector connect on forums like this. So thank you for this opportunity. And I think, what I'll share today, I'm really going to touch on some core aspects, but time does not permit us to delve fully deeper into it. But I think these will be enough for just stimulating thinking on this area. So I teach international economics. So import exports are my main subjects also. And then I'm doing some consulting work in the private sector and so on. So this is the topic that I'm passionate about. I wrote a book recently about the inclusive economy, which I'll share a little bit later on, because I think, especially when you talk about trade, you have to take the microeconomic as well as the macroeconomic dynamics into consideration. I will touch on that in a moment from an inclusive economy perspective. So the first slide, just some data. You can move to the next one, Harry. Thank you. Just some data on world trade figures. I think we all are aware, after COVID, all the economies basically just started and tried to recover some of the losses, but of course it really took some time. But what it shows that if you do a comparison between a year-on-year change, even just the last 2 years, compared to a quarter-to-quarter change, you'll see that in most of the areas, North America, Africa, South America, Europe, China, Russia, and also Australia, there's been an increase in imports and exports. A lot has been the case in terms of exports in many of the regions. And I think it's part of the growth spur after, COVID and just industries trying to recover some losses and just gain market access as quickly as possible and just get that competitive edge. So trade has picked up, but if you look at the quarter-to-quarter comparison, you see much lower figures, 1%, 2%, 3%, which tells you that whole peak in world trade has come down. If we go to the next slide, Harry, that even becomes more clear. When we look at the different, sectors of the economy and also the different products being traded, you can see there, maybe just start on the right, the graph there, the comparison between the 22-21 figures and the 2020 and 21 in red. In red, you can see the massive increase in world trade, and that's directly after the lockdown. But then in black, you can see how trade literally fell in all those areas. And it's very interesting that your luxury products, fashion products, and many of those first increased in terms of volume. And then now things like cars, transport, and agriculture equipment are literally in a negative figure in terms of world trade. So it shows you, that much of the trade has come down, the volume of trade. And the graph on the left is very interesting. There you can see the comparison between services growth and goods growth. And this is also in terms of global trade. And the statistics tell you there that 2021 was basically the peak year going into 2022, and then it started to fall. And now in 23, it clearly shows coming down to even, 10% growth, which is really low compared to almost 30% growth end of 2021. But in terms of the service and the goods quality growth, that has decreased a bit. So it shows you, though in quantity there's been an increase in trade, the quality is to a large extent a concern. So this is just to give us a picture of the global trade situation, and then one can contextualize and just see how is Africa doing in this. On the previous graph, we saw an increase in exports, but the thing is, you know, our export earnings are much less because we mostly export primary products, you know, compared to the first world countries who's exporting secondary and tertiary products, which boosts their export earnings a lot. So, and that's also something to compare and to consider, the comparison between export earnings and also export volume. Volume doesn't mean export earnings are increasing, and that has implication for your terms of trade. Because if your formula for your terms of trade is you know, export earnings increasing at a faster rate than import costs. And the moment that improves, you know, you've got a situation where the overall welfare of the country is supposed to increase. But when import costs are increased, trade decreases, which means you are actually performing worse. And I think that's where South Africa are at the moment, especially many of the African countries. So yeah, just in terms of figures, I wanted to highlight that. Harry, you can move to the next slide. And then just in terms of just the broader picture, because I think we can talk about trade, and I'll talk about the building blocks in a moment, but I think we are, especially in South Africa, this is the main factor to take into consideration. The fact that capitalism as a system is struggling due to the gap between rich and poor, the inequality that it reinforces, even with and after the COVID lockdown, and then also the escalating debt levels. Even corporate debt is escalating tremendously. Public debt, as we know, and especially with exchange rates weakening in your developing countries, you know, your debt repayment increases a lot. So yeah, it begs the question, you know, the kind of capitalism we have, is it sustainable, you know, or are we moving towards popular socialism? The Chinese model seems to be very popular. One grave concern, I think, is the World Economic Forum emphasizing that the Chinese model might be the model for the future. Now, China as a socialist, they have a mixed economy, but it is socialist in essence. With other words, the government have the final say about resources, so it's centralized control. Now, if the World Economic Forum sees that as the future, you know, it is a major concern for many of the rest of the world. So, and then South Africa, we are at a place now after the BRICS meeting that we had, where BRICS are now going to include Iran and, you know, Turkey and many of the countries that are, you know, anti-Western. You know, so on the one hand, we're taking the hand of the Chinese because we are getting benefits from them. But on the other hand, we have agreements with the West. You know, the AGOA one with North America is probably the most well-known one. That agreement is coming up for a decision in 2025, and there's a AGOA gathering between the US and South African leaders later in the year, and if we lose that agreement, you know, it will cost this economy billions, because it allows us market access into the American economy, especially agricultural products and manufacturing. You know, a lot of the tariffs and quotas of trade are taken away. So, you know, and they are concerned with our agreements now with the East. So we are right in the middle, and not just South Africa, but I think the whole of Africa. So this just points to the fact that Africa will need to kind of you know, reinvent itself, both in terms of its relations, but also in terms of its self-sustainability, and also the regional agreements. You know, how can Africa itself, you know, become less dependent on the rest of the world, and in the process reposition itself? itself. So I think those are some of the questions if we talk about trade competitiveness and becoming more, internationally competitive, some of the key things that needs to get in place. So the next slide, Harry. Another part of the puzzle, which is becoming more and more important, is the move towards a more sustainable economy, a green economy, some would call it a circular economy. And this also places pressure on especially your export industries, because, as we all know, moving towards a more greener economy have cost implications for many of the industries, the way they produce, the dealing of waste, all of those things have cost implications, and it's not so easy to just move towards a greener economy. If you think of manufacturing, if you think of mining, many of those big industries and sectors in the economy, they can't just make a quick shift. But the reality is that we literally have no choice. And this might be the place where it presents an opportunity for Africa to develop a more circular economy. And in fact, in my book, a circular economy is part of a more inclusive economy, where we need to rethink how we deal with waste, reuse, reform, reduce, and then recycle, and then through that extend your supply chain, in your economy. And in that way, you create more inclusion, you create more sustainability, and also new profit opportunities. And I think these are some of the key questions that we need to address. I'm not going to delve fully into this, but this is a major aspect. Because if you look at the SDG, Sustainable Development Goals, drawn up by the UN, creating a sustainable economy is central. But it's not just for those reasons. It's literally for the practical implications. They're actually saying statistics show that if the third world countries want to catch up with the first world countries, and we generate growth on the same trajectory, with other words, we generate growth in the same way that the first world countries are generating it, we would need the resources of 27 Earths or planet Earths, and we don't have that. So which means that for us to catch up with the first world countries, we will have a different growth trajectory, where it's not so much industrialized growth, but it's more regenerative growth, and it's more inclusive growth. And those do present opportunities. And I think actually Africa is perfectly positioned for this. In my book, I delve into this. How do we generate inclusive growth, and making sure we generate true progress? Because on the one hand, you can have growth, but if growth does not create more opportunities and it creates a gap between rich and poor, there's no development taking place, and you haven't got a sustainable model. And so it's vital that we move towards a sustainable model, not because the World Economic Forum requires it or the powers that be, but because we need to manage our resources more responsibly, especially in Africa, and in that way become more self-sustainable. I think that is the key thing. Africa needs to move away from its dependence on the rest of the world. We export the gold, but we import the gold products at a much higher cost. So eventually, we buy back what we sell, but at a much higher cost, which is not the wisest thing. So we need the skills. Skills are vital in terms of, promoting export competitiveness. Then just the next slide, Barry. We're getting to the building blocks. And I'm just going to briefly touch on each of these. I hope you can read there. So there's, of course, much more building blocks if you want to increase your trade competitiveness, especially from an export point of view. But these are probably, I would say, the 7 main ones that I would identify. So number one, of course, you need to address trade barriers, tariffs, quotas, non-tariff barriers to trade, I think the World Trade Organization, WTO, has made quite some strides in creating fair trade, because remember, you can have free trade, but it's not necessarily fair trade. Free trade, is about taking away tariffs and quotas, but still many countries find other ways to gain a competitive advantage that is unlike friendly market competition principles. And I think this is vital in Africa, that we move away from and eradicate the trade barriers. There has been a move in this direction, I think, especially in the SADC region. There has been a strong move away from all forms of tariffs and quotas, because the thing is, these are restricting trade, and it's limiting the benefits to be gained from trade, because from trade, and especially export earnings, you want to be able to, increase salary levels and, increase average growth and income levels in your economy. But tariffs and quotas, to a large extent, prevents that. And also it's creating an unequal playing field, which is to the detriment of the third world economies. Number two, there needs to be investment in transport, and especially in South Africa, we have a major problem with our railroads, logistical challenges, ports. There was the whole issue about the ports, products couldn't be shipped and to travel to the rest of the country. So for us, this is vital. Telecommunications, reliable supply of water and electricity. Now with the lockdowns, these things are, it can literally make or break your whole economy. And that's why, especially your strong industries and manufacturing and, they need to be sure that they have a good electricity supply. These are some of the basics, and this is probably the biggest reason why we are becoming less and less competitive on the international scene. I think our new Minister of Electricity said that I think South Africa's economy just in the last year has lost 300 billion only due to load shedding. So it shows you the cost of this to the economy, and it's a basic requirement. It's not even giving us a cutting edge. So number three is, of course, a skilled and adaptable workforce. And especially nowadays, I think work is defined differently. It's not like this cookie cutter. You need a mixture of skills, especially in a world where there's technology and technological transfers, to stimulate income growth. The benefit of trade is that it facilitates the technological transfers, and you get exposed to the technology in different countries, and that creates opportunities. And nowadays, with innovation, the speed of innovation increasing, technological transfer can happen at a much lower cost. So you bring down your marginal cost, and you actually create new, opportunities to generate, at least in the local market, some competitive advantage through that. Then number four, export financing and support. This, of course, is very important, and which is a challenge, especially if we are downgraded by the rating agencies. We are now at sub-investment level, which means, our interest on international debt increases. If the rand's value weakens, it means our, we pay more for financing. We can say exports benefit through a weaker rand, but still, it's unsustainable if the financing costs are increasing. So your export credit agencies play a very important role in this. And then, of course, insurance to exporters, creating that safe space for them to be able to export, and then incentives and grants, so that companies can become more competitive, to expand into new markets internationally. So Then number 5, diversification of exports. And I think this is a major factor, especially in Africa and many of the third world countries. We cannot be dependent on just 1 or 2 or 3 main export products or industries. We need to diversify industries so that we can diversify what we export. And I think in that way, that's if you look at all the global trends, most of the economies, even China, as the growth that they've had since, let's say, the 1990s, and the tremendous advancement has been through the growth has attracted FDI, foreign direct investment. And the moment there's capital inflow, it stimulates more export and more production. And in that way, you generate much higher return on investment, which is what your companies ask for as well as the investors. And eventually it benefits governments. More taxes are being paid, the tax base broadens. So that is vital, especially for Africa. So number 6 is environmental and sustainability considerations. This is becoming more and more important. There's a lot of international legal requirements, international best practice requirements with regards to moving towards more sustainability, or the green economy, as it were. So it requires adjustments in your exports, and then also, environmental aspects to consider. But I think it is taking us to a more responsible economy, especially if you look at the social responsibility aspects. And it is something, in the capitalist mindset, competitive, that is not the highest priority. And so suddenly we are forced in this direction. I think the picture shows something of moving from a linear economy to a more holistic, circular economy, a more balanced. And I think this requires exports to be much more adjustable, because we also work with a much more, how can I put it, environmentally conscious buyer, consumer. They want to see on the product has there been any form of recycling on the through the product or with the product or whatever, has it been made from recycling material, those kind of things. So I think this is a good thing, but it places pressure on exporters. But I just think, for especially Africa, it provides actually opportunity for us to enter that market space better and better equipped to be able to produce in a more sustainable way and actually lead that initiative globally. So 7, the last point is the aspect of inclusivity. And this is very important. You won't be able to stimulate exports sustainably unless there's proper collaboration between government, private sector, and other stakeholders in society. With government, of course, we're talking about government policy, trade policy, how they adjust that in order to provide protection for local industries, but on the other hand, enhance competitiveness and also, in a way, create a more fair trade environment. The government are represented on the world organizations, and they need to stand on behalf of the private sector, the businesses that are doing the production, the factories, and all the different agriculture and so on that's producing. And then private sector, more collaboration at private sector level, in African context between regions, between countries, much more collaboration, and then other stakeholders, your NGOs, and also other partners that stimulate international trade. And then inclusivity also in terms of global value chains. I think a major concern is market access and how market access have been manipulated, where your first world countries have, almost monopolized that space. And inclusivity in trade is extremely important. And this is something that needs to be dealt with at the WTO level, but governments needs to be involved. The industry leaders needs to be involved, because unless this is properly championed, the playing field will always be skewed when we'll have an uphill battle the whole time. So these 7, I would say, is your core building blocks for building a strong export economy. These were also the main things, many of them, not all of them, are that reposition the Chinese economy. I think you would all remember that in the 1990s, China had a poverty rate of 98%, and now they've got a poverty rate of 2% of the population. So much job creation has happened through export growth, and through that, stimulating economic growth, average income levels rising. So that's the the knock-on effects of a strong export industry. And so I think these are vital. The second one, or next one, Harry. This is just sorry, I don't see it yet. Yeah, this is just a picture of my book. So with the book, I've really analyzed and looked at what are the principles and the criteria of inclusive economy. Because I think that's the broader question we need to ask. How can trade, especially exports, play a much bigger role in creating a more inclusive economy? And not inclusion for the sake of inclusion, it is productive inclusion, but based on Ubuntu principles. One of the key challenges with Africa's economy is that we're using a Western model, capitalism, that's not fully working in the African context, because the Western model is very individualized, whereas the African thinking is more collectivistic. And I think we need a more collectivistic form of market-based system, capitalism, but incorporating communalist principles. And just to say, in the book, I explain how these interplay between, on the one hand, you need to make profit, but on the other hand, you need to make sure that no one is hungry, for instance, and everybody is part of the contributing to the economy. So you want to raise productivity on the one hand, but on the other hand, you want to make sure that your economy and business runs successfully. So just to highlight, I think the question of inclusivity, especially for Africa, is vital. If we can get this right, we will fully unlock Africa's potential. And we are sitting on the richest continent in the world, but we are the poorest, simply because we have the wrong models, and also because we're not properly managing resources on this continent. So inclusivity also means greater responsibility and ownership of shared resources. The next one, Mary, and I just want to close with this one, because I think it's very important. On the one hand, we want economic growth, and we measure economic growth with, GDP growth and GDP per capita, which gives you a more or less indication of economic progress, but it's not the real indicator. This is an indicator, the GPI, Genuine Progress Indicator, that I've proposed in my book as well. And this is a more sustainable form of progress. So what you'll see there on the graph is GDP growth. That's global GDP growth since 1945 to about 2015. And so parallel to that, until about early 1990s, you had a parallel growth, but then the GPI, Genuine Progress Indicator, shows you that actually, although GDP has grown, in genuine terms, in real terms, our economy has weakened since then. So the GPI basically includes social and environmental costs of growth, because this needs to be balanced to get a more holistic picture. And I think as exporters, this is very important to take into consideration, because this is the only way you would generate real progress, genuine progress, and also much improved sustainability. So I just wanted to bring this to your attention. So Harry, thank you so much for the opportunity. And would love, if there's any questions, anyone is welcome. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Arno. We really appreciate this comprehensive presentation, and so many challenges that we need to be, aware of. And the concern is, yes, growth remains weak for global trade trends, and it's obviously got an impact of our own economy as well. And as he's talking about many forces, political, sustainability, so many things we need to understand. And we buy back what we sell more expensively. So that's a great concern. So we need to get things right. Thank you for sharing those building blocks. That was great. Arno, I just want to know, will you be able to stay on for the questions and answers at 1:45, or will you take questions now?
Harry, please, now, if you don't mind, I have another meeting I have to run to. So yes, now would be best. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Arno. So ladies and gents, let's quickly take questions then for Dr. Arno. Should you have questions, you're welcome to unmute. I'll be able to see yourself unmuting, and once recognized, you can ask your question, or you can raise your hands in the Zoom function. So let's see, is there any question for Dr. Arno? Let's give them a minute or two. Right, Werner, you're welcome to unmute, and if you want, you can switch on your camera as well and ask your question.
Thank you, Harry, and thank you, Dr. van der Kerk. Very interesting view and theoretical perspective on the export process as well. So I enjoyed your presentation. Just a question from my side. Your genuine progress indicator, is that also aligned with the donut economic model? It seems quite similar. The donut economic model theory seems to address economic growth in the same perspective, which I think moving to a circular economy is a fantastic way to map out how we are doing from a humane perspective as well. So just that question from my side. Is there any ties to the donut economic theory?
Yeah, thank you, Werner. Actually, in my book, I flesh out the donut economic theory, the donut model, as it's called. It's a very good model. So the donut model, just for everybody's sake, is like, like a typical donut, round with a hole in the middle. And what it does, it's got on the outside, it's your environmental factors. And it measures how we are overshooting in terms of the use of, or gases that are emitted, and all kinds of environmental, concerns. And then the inside of the donut measures the social stability. And you then balance these two to make sure you are within the boundaries of nature, if you can put it like that, but also not at a social cost, if I can put it like that. So the influence of your social factors, even factors like marriage, sustainability of societies. I mean, when many marriages collapse, it affects your sustainability. Werner, absolutely, you need to balance the social, environmental, and economic factors, and we need to be much more intentional in terms of how we steer this and manage it. The key thing there is just that the one should not be at the cost of the other. There will always be some cost, but up until now, it has been very excessive. And yes, I think this is the new thinking, and also not just new thinking in terms of just a new idea. It is much more holistic in terms of creating the sustainability that we need. So thank you.
Thank you, Arno. Babalelo, you're welcome to unmute and ask your question.
Thank you, sir. Dr. Arno, thank you so much for the great lecture. It was really some great insights that you shared. I've learned a lot. Just a quick question on my side. You mentioned that as third world countries, one of the biggest challenges is that we don't have ease of market access compared to first world countries. What do you think from your side would we need to do as third world countries to be able to also transform to becoming pioneering countries? Because obviously if we're always receiving secondhand information. We don't have the opportunity to take, or exploit these opportunities from a profitability perspective, regardless of which sector we're in, whether it's renewable energies, whether it's transport. What's the gap there, and what can we do to really make a change here?
Yeah, thank you, Papabelo. It's a very important question. That's the only way you can deal or become more trade competitive. So I think in terms of market access, for me, number one, we need to improve our bargaining power. At the moment, we are at the mercy of the Chinese and the mercy of the West, and we're hoping for the best. And we're not a force, especially let's take Africa as an example. While we are a good, destination for many sectors, we are not, a force at the bargaining table. And I think this is where the change needs to happen, and exactly where collaboration between government, private sector, and other stakeholders, so that collaboratively we can come as a stronger force to the bargaining table. I mean, that's what the other countries are doing. The Biden administration is literally just representing corporate America at the bargaining table. So if other countries are doing this, we need to do the same. The challenge is just the lack of trust between private sector and public sector. The social contract is broken, and this is a major concern. And the other thing that will help with increased market access is our own skills development, our own capacity to produce at a more sophisticated level, moving from primary exports to tertiary and secondary exports is vital, but you need the skills so that we can have more people that can contribute towards that production at that level, so that in that way the opportunity for getting market access is much better. And of course our export earnings will increase. It will double, triple immediately. So I think skills and bargaining power is the key for market access.
Thank you, Dr. van Niekerk.
Thank you, Dr. Arno. Arno, thank you so much for your presentation. Really appreciate it. Have safe travels. I know you're quite on the road on this stage, and hopefully we'll see you soon at the Transport Forum again. So thank you very much for sharing your knowledge with us. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Harry. Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye. Right, ladies and gents, that was a great presentation. Now we've got another great presentation, and that is Ms. Yolanda Fourie. She's a transport economist and associate at Zutari, also a gold sponsor with the Transport Forum. She's going to talk about regional export bottlenecks. Thank you very much, Yolanda.
Thank you. Let me just share my screen. We did have a dry run. So let me just get this one open.
No rush, no problem.
Sorry.
Perfect.
Can you see?
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. Well, firstly, I want to say morning to all my fellow speakers, also to our hosts, and of course, all the delegates. And Harry, thank you so much for the invite to be here today and speak at the forum again. And before I start, I just want to give a disclaimer that when Harry phoned me a while back and he said, Yolanda, can you come and talk about exports? I said, no way, that's not really my work line that I do, but I have a passion for corridors, regional corridors across Africa. And I said, okay, if I turn it a little bit upside down, I can then look at it and talk of my observations on these corridors over 14 years that I've been working on them. So that's my first disclaimer. And secondly, I wear a few hats. So to also take it as it comes, I first have I first start with a maritime economics hat. So if you look at a port, that is really the gateway of trade, the import and export of goods and economic development. That's also my first love, and I'm a specialist in maritime economics. Then secondly, I also wear a hat of transport economics. Also, I reside within Zutari, and of course, we work across a lot of sectors as well as a lot of regions and markets. So there you've got the different nodes and the links that forms part of this system. That's a transport corridor. The links, if I talk about a link, it's the railway line, our road infrastructure network. If I talk about nodes, that is of course a port for import exports, a seaport or a lake port. You also have your border post facilities, which is also a node because it's between different countries. And then we also talk about whether it's an intermodal trade facility or an inland container depot, or it's got a lot of different names these days, but that is what I refer to when I say links and modes. And each of these links and modes are also absolutely unique in their own sense, and a study are done on each of them and the improvement and efficiency thereof. And in my third hat, which I always wear, and the people that knows me is my Africa hat. And I'm really a African, and I'm very proud thereof. And that's something in our company, Zutari, that we also really believe in, that we strive to have an impact on the communities we work in. We design roads and railways and hospitals and clinics and all of that, because we really want to enhance the economies for both trade and for human movement, of course. So if I go to the next slide, here's all the corridors. And as I said, I've really had the privilege over the last 14 years. So yes, I am part of the furniture there at Zutari. And also, as Harry mentioned earlier, I started as in Africon, then we merged and we became Oricon. And then we demerged in 2020 and we are now Zutari. So I had the privilege of working on many of these corridors, looking at improvement of efficiency. How can we, get cargo through the corridor faster, more efficiently, and also, of course, at a lower cost. So that has been the focus. And in that, I've really had the privilege to physically drive most of these corridors and interact with the public sector, the private sector, communities, the users, the drivers, and also, of course, your clients, your end users, and your sellers, buyers. So I've had the privilege, and just quickly to go around the map, and it's not the entire Africa, of course, so this is just a recent map. I can start there on the east is our northern corridor, which of course starts in the port of Mombasa and feeds back into the hinterland of Uganda, Rwanda. Then we've got the central corridor that's also runs in parallel, but it's from the port of Dar es Salaam, going inland also to Burundi, Rwanda, and the Congo. And then from the map there, we can start seeing we've got the Dar es Salaam corridor, coming down into Zambia, Malawi, and also then up into Congo. And then around the bend, of course, the Nacala corridor, and Beira corridors, which is mainly bulk corridors as well. And then, of course, our Maputo corridor, which is very close to home and a very well-run corridor in many aspects. Then also, if I go around to the west, I really had the privilege to drive the Trans-Kalahari, the Trans-Caprivi, Trans-Kunene, to drive those corridors and talk to all the stakeholders along the way. So I've spent time at many of these border posts and the nodes, and of course at all the authorities also along the way. So with all these hats that I've now said that I wear on a daily basis, and also this experience and understanding the flow of goods, you know, we've got bulk commodities going on certain corridors. We've got container, which is also reefer commodities, includes that, our fruit and wines and all of that. And then of course, also there's automotive corridors. So I've got a good understanding, learned a lot over all of these years. And with the topic or the theme of today's forum being exports, you know, to me then, the combination of that is that yes, as South Africa, we export via the seaports and mainly, as Arno said before me, primary products, which is our iron ore and our coal. But we also import other goods into Africa, the region, which is cross-border. And that is where I talk about the corridors. And then decided I will focus on what is really restricting, what is hampering this trade. So if I go to the next slide, and there's really, if we look at how many barriers we have, and I know before me mentioned quite a few as well in our economy. I only picked 3 that I've been observing over the last while, because if I have to add to this list, I can stay here the whole day and talk to you. So I'm looking at these 3, which is the border post infrastructure, and then security and safety, which is also quite close to my heart. And I'm doing this also as a holistic view of across the region. It's not on a specific border, corridor, or a specific border, or anything like that. This is more holistically of experience and observations made of all my work done in the region. So if we jump into the border posts. So of course, a border post firstly is, it's a delay. It's an area where there's always, it's like when I was a student, I can't give away my age many moons back. We supply chains just became a topic. Supply chain logistics became a topic in my 4th year. And I will never forget that one of the first things that we learned, the supply chain will only be as strong as its weakest link, and meaning it will slow it down. Now, border post, as we have it, experienced it in Africa, is quite a delay factor. And when you have a delay, it means costs and time. So just something that we also experience at our borders, and there's so many topics again under each of the head topics. So I'm just keeping to a few that's the most prominent for me in my experience, is that we still have a lot of manual customs and clearing systems on our borders, which means it's a lot of paperwork, permit applications, in-person And also, of course, a lot of trading of money then, if we can call it that. So then we also have the experience of some of the borders have progressed and have moved, and countries have moved across into electronic clearance systems, the single window system or whatever. But the other side is not. And of course, immediately that causes a blockage and a slowdown. So you're going from the one to the other. So, and also please, my idea is not any doom and gloom. It's just, this is the realities. These are the facts, but also saying that a lot is being done in the background, in the economic communities, the donors, and also by all authorities involved to really prioritize the efficiency and operations of everything. So with the electronic systems, there's also, of course, the major benefit is that it's cashless. So meaning that there's not a change of money by hand, which will, and that's maybe why there's so little or slow progress, is that in Africa, when I drove on these corridors, you get to know that it's pocket money. That's how it is referred to, because there is poverty across our region, and this is a way of people actually getting extra income. But we've got to move away from it, and like Arno said, yes, we've got to have an inclusive economy. And while we are trading, we've also got to ensure that there's lots of job creation and also that the money goes back into the economies. And then also, as I mentioned, there's the manual and the electronic systems on the borders, and you also have the different custom systems like ASACUDA and NATIS, and they are not talking to one another. So it must be an ITC integration. And I know Magda and all of them, they're doing great work on that and looking at it. So they understand it better than me. And please, I'm not a specialist in it. This is just observations of it. Also, going hand in hand really with the manual and the electronic systems is that processes and procedures of trade and of customs clearance and immigration and everything, it's not standardized and integrated on most of these corridors. So even with COVID, take that example. Well, what happened is we as South Africa, we said, boom, we locked down. And we're not allowing any trade in and out of the countries. But on the other side of the border, that's not, those countries didn't. So all of a sudden, there's these rows and rows and queues of kilometers of trucks just being stranded there at the border. So it's also, those operations must be integrated and standardized in order to create efficiency. That also goes with these cashless borders, and I can mention a few examples here, is that when I was last at Kasumbalesa, for instance, and Tundumanakonde, there was about 24 different agents that the truck driver has to go to with his papers and go and show paper for paper to get clearance on everything. And it's just too many. It can be integrated so easily into that digitized system that I saw Magda will talk later about. Then, of course, there's also a concept of, I just want to put up the pictures that it's also there. Sorry, let me just move like that. So there's also the concept of smart borders. So traffic flow management and Here you will see, I'm not mentioning one-stop border post, and please, it's only my personal belief, not that of my company, but it's not one-stop border post that I'm referring to here. I'm rather referring to a smart border where you've got dedicated traffic lines for fast-flowing traffic, for bulk materials to go easily, and all of that. So there's really brilliant traffic flow management systems globally available that we can incorporate across Africa. And in saying all of the above, the most important, and Arno also made mention of that, is our legal framework, institutional framework, and also, of course, the political will. Because we've got the SADC, the COMESA, the EIC, all these economic communities of the world, the TTFP. They are all working so hard on aligning, harmonization of standards, of rules, of all these agreements, because every country still have their own. And we are trying to capture it in the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement. But of course, not everybody has signed off on it as yet of today. And it's slow in the uptake. But that is really the baseline. If we don't get this right, all of the top that I mentioned, that will struggle to get into place. The second one, let me just look at the pictures. So there, of course, is just to show the two pictures on the left top, on the right top, is just at Beitbridge, the top one, and at Komatipoort, the second one, is just to show the queues and queues of trucks standing, waiting at the border. And here at the bottom is a smart border concept that I just took a picture of. So moving over to the next barrier, as I say it, and I'm also so glad because Arno mentioned it as well. You know, infrastructure is really the backbone of movement and of trade and economic development. If you can't get the product from the mine to the port and export to the trader in China or India, then you can't get an income. But unfortunately, we've got these beautiful networks across the region, but the maintenance thereof is poor. And again, it's something that it's a mind change and ownership that we as a continent, we've got to take back and say, if we get a road, or if we get a railway, or get a port or a border post facility, then we've got to maintain it, be proud of it, and do the best that we can with it. And if we collect road user charges from toll fees or border permits and all of that, that must be delved back into the network, that it's safe, that it's a safe network to move on. And also, of course, if you've got a road like you see there on the right hand side, that's just damaged, or that pothole that the giraffe is sitting in, then your vehicles, you have a reduction in speed. There's also damage to your vehicles, which increases your vehicle operating costs. And that, in the end of the day, it rolls over onto your end product, the cost to the end user, which increases. And, so that you want to reduce, and also the time it takes to get there. So our networks must really be maintained and developed accordingly to what it has to carry, and continuously the whole time. Then just on efficiencies of operations, and we've had speakers in the past on these forums talking about the open access, and we know that the white paper is out there, and we really need this, that if I just look at rail, is why does a train have to stop, a loco and a train have to stop when it goes from border to border? Let's take the north-south corridor. Why does it have to stop at each and every border, change of loco, change of crew? That I get, because everybody is not trained on all the systems. But we need open access on our rails for our goods to flow. The same in our ports, and that's also where it's very, what will I say, refreshing to see that Transnet is inviting private operation into our ports. And because then we can open it up and it can be more efficient in our operations. And yeah, we will see where that is going to. And that's also inclusive, but we've got to learn to trust each other as well. Then, of course, in infrastructure, something that's not everywhere yet is the technology that's available worldwide to create efficiency in our operations on our corridors. We do have way in motion on many, but not all. So we in places still have where you've got to stop and go over the weigh bridge and each and every truck. That's also a blockage, or it's just not working. So there's way in motion systems, for instance. Also there's driverless locos, as an example. And in the port environment, there's also driverless handling gear. Everything can happen in a planned system where if you've got stable electricity and your ICT, then you can actually handle it from a computer, your port operation, terminal operation systems. So the next one is, and as I said, this is actually quite a passion of mine. And it really becomes a reality if you see how drivers are being neglected or suffering in their job as truck drivers or as train drivers or all of that. It really becomes a very unsafe environment. And the one thing that we can do, because remember, in the end of the day, that truck driver or train driver, whether it's male or female, is a father, is a brother, is a grandfather, is a brother or sister of someone, and has to go back to their family safely. So for that, we get along these corridors that I've observed over many years, because of the blockages caused by a border, for instance, a natural truck park will just start next to the road, where trucks will just go and park just to not block the road, that the traffic from the front can actually come through. But that is just, as I say, natural, but it's unsafe. We need safe truck stops, well-established safe truck stop with washing facilities where the cargo can be safe, where the drivers can be safe, and all of that. We need more of those. And that's also, of course, where the private sectors can get involved in our corridors. Then, of course, 2 minutes. Thank you, Harry. I'm nearly there. Thank you. So, yeah, what we have been seeing of late, of course, and that is what the pictures that I've put up here, is that in South Africa, cable theft and vandalism to our infrastructure is a reality. And that means policing has to be employed. And that's also, that must be initiative from government and private sector to agree on that and to make it safe. Also, when you have the queues at the border. And just another thing, and that's my last point on this one. If we can have these electronic clearance of goods, say from it's an import commodity from let's say Dar es Salaam to the Congo. If it's cleared and it's on a container on a truck and it goes through all the borders and straight through into a bonded warehouse or customs area in the end destination, that already also becomes a safer transport corridor. So yeah, just in summary then, you know, as I said, we've come a long way with the development and improvement of our corridors. But we do still have a long way to go as well. And we really have to take hands and work on it together. And that's where I just want to end off with that saying by Nelson Mandela: we can change the world and make it a better place. It's in our hands to make a difference. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Yolanda. And I must say, Dr. Yolanda Fourie, apologies for missing out on your PhD. Really appreciate the great presentation that you've actually done to us. And I know you're also very busy. Thank you very much for, I'm just trying to stop the sharing here. There we go. Thank you for sharing the knowledge as well. And that's so concerning to learn about, you know, the barriers to trade and where we are on this stage to sort this out in South Africa. And we're thankful for the many hats you're wearing, because clearly you're adding a lot of value from Zutali's perspective to actually make our economy work and contributing to the GDP of our country. So thank you very much, Yolanda. Will you be available for a questions and answer session?
Yes, I'll stay on.
Thank you so much, Yolanda. I really appreciate it. So, ladies and gents, we're back at our program again, and our next presenter then is Magda Hugo. She's the General Manager and Customs Specialist at Global Trade Solution. She's going to talk about why becoming an authorized economic operator, known as AEO, will benefit your export activities. Thank you very much, Magda.
Thank you, Harry. Thank you, Yolandi and Arno, for very insightful presentations to date. I think it has been, yeah, I see a lot of the same wording come across, you know, and Yolandi, to your question about automating clearing and making it really simply better, faster. We've got some exciting presentation a bit later today, which will be presented by Anton to really tell you that there is some real nice improvements happening in this space. So yeah, I mean, what we've heard to date so far is really, I think the key things is trade barriers, there's collaboration between governments, there's delays at borders, we need to simplify procedures, it's expensive to trade, our infrastructure is not where it should be. So yeah, there's lots of challenges within this space, and I think what is important is to really embrace what programs is available. And my talk will really be about the AEO, the Approved Economic Operator Program, that is currently talking specifically South Africa available. And yeah, so I'll be taking you through the presentation, and then, as you say, questions and answers a bit later today, then I will be available, Harry. Okay. You can see my screen?
Yes, perfect. Thank you.
Perfect. So yeah, so it's really talking about the becoming an AEO and what is the benefits really in this space. Oopsie. Wrong button. So yeah, so I'll be taking you through the introduction of the AEO concept, what the benefits is to be an AEO accredited, typically what's available on the SARS AEO program and what has been achieved this far, focusing on the mutual recognition, because if we talk about trade barriers and collaboration, that's one of the items that really stands out and should definitely be embraced by international trade. and then also just high level, what is the requirements in order to participate in this process. So basically introducing the AEO concept. So what is an AEO? An AEO is an approved economic operator, is a party that's involved in international trade that complies with the World Customs Organization or equivalent supply chain security standards. And who typically can participate in this is anyone in the international supply that is performing a customs-related activity. For importers, exporters, custom agents, freight forwarders, carriers, LSP, manufacturers, and so forth, all can all participate in this program. So the establishment of the AEO program was really around, from a global trade perspective, there was an increase in security threats, increase in movement of goods around the world, and that also focused then on to really look at definitely securing the flow and just not focusing on the collection of duties. So it was definitely one of the objectives what had to be achieved is to really look at the overall flow of the cargo. So the AEO program is aligned with the international standards, and what is very important is it forms part of the WCO SAFE framework of standards. Now, obviously, as we know, to participate and to have collaboration, it is very important to have specific standards in this industry so that it is more of a predictable environment. So from a WCO framework of standards, so the WIC drafted the framework of standards to secure and facilitate the global trade in response of the increase in global trade and security threats that there were, or it still is. And basically the 5 core principles that wants to be achieved with this framework is the harmonization of the advanced electronic cargo information that is shared, the consistent approach to risk management and address the security issues across participating countries. It also looks at the correct risk assessments that's happening from an outbound perspective, both on cargo and containers that's moving. The benefit to the business, which will meet then the minimum supply chain standards. Then also the close cooperation with other government agencies, and we will talk a bit in more detail about that later. So basically the 5 key principles that it looks after, as we said now, is really looking after the compliance. What is available from a record keeping perspective? What is your financial status? Are you up to date? A competence from a resourcing perspective, and security and safety. And I will be focusing also a little bit more further down in the slide deck on that. So yeah, so from an AEO program, what is it? It is a customs to business partnership. It's based on that, it's built on that. And based on obviously the principle of the SAFE framework of standards. And that's to secure and to facilitate the global trade. The concept was adopted, and I'm not going to go through that into detail because we're going to focus more on the SA side of it. So it was introduced to enhance the international supply chain security and to facilitate the movement of legitimate goods. So the different countries compile and implement different versions of the AEO program. There are different methods available. So not always having the same type of program that I run, but they are very similar. There is obviously a standard. So what is an AEO program? So the focus was really shifted from the actual goods itself to be a more trader and a role player specific relationship. So within this international supply chain. So the compliant traders are given an AEO status, which means they are lower risk companies and they can therefore be trusted by customs. So with that, obviously, less or fewer controls can then be introduced. So what is the benefits of becoming an AEO? You are low risk. There should be more benefits to you. There should be a lesser interaction with you. You should be available or be able to have access to any staff, or not staff, sorry, apology. It should be the availability of a contact person that can deal and support you with your challenges within the international trade from a customs perspective specifically. It should have time savings. It should have less risk. It should be having a predictable experience from a customs perspective. It should also be having a less of a reduced risk and also less interferences with your flow of cargo. So the benefits. So I want to focus more on our benefits really on I've got the slide deck available and it will be shared with you as Harry explained. So we can go into a bit more detail later with it, but I want to focus on the South African side of it. But just from an SME perspective is basically it leverages off the playing field for all companies because there's a standard. It is, there's an expectation exactly how it should work. There's a standardization around it. There's ongoing education in this process, and it should have a cost saving. And that is how it's leveraging off the playing field for all traders that participate in imports and exports. So just in a nutshell, the 6 key items, it should be the speed, predictability, the lower cost, the prioritized treatment that you receive, mutual recognition, and recognized as a trader. So it comes with obviously various benefits, and I will also stand still a bit later on that. But basically the main objective, as we said, because we've listened now today, it's trade barriers, it's collaboration. So the mutual recognition agreements that's available, those are the fundamental relationships that we need to get in place, because that is how we will speed up processes. That's how we will start trusting each other. That's how we will collaborate with other customs agencies. To Yolandi's point earlier, the one process is very sophisticated, but the other process is still not aligned. So it's our collaboration between both sides of the fence that we are trading with, or both customs authorities. So looking at the South African AEO program, so there were different levels of accreditation that was implemented. So you get 2 levels. So the first level is an AEOC called a level 1, and you get an AEOS, which is a level 2. So the first one, the level 1, looks after your compliance, where the second one looks after more the security of the process. So basically with this programs so far to date, so the first level was introduced or implemented in 2017, and it is currently celebrating 179 accredited traders on that program. With the AEOS, which is the second level, it was implemented in 2021. It looks after, it also then have 16 accredited traders in that space. So that is actually a phenomenal achievement to date. And obviously there's an aggressive, and I mean it's in due respect, rollout and collaboration from all stakeholders to be really on board, and SARS obviously driving this implementation. So just looking at level 1. So what will level 1 really be about? It is the 3-year record keeping. So it looks at your records of compliance. So from the time that you actually apply for the program, SARS will actually look at a 3-year records of your customs and compliance documents and procedures that's in place. It then will also then look at your customs knowledge as a second point. So you will actually have to undergo a self-assessment test with SARS to get also the qualification that you have the sufficient customs knowledge. Then thirdly, it looks after your operational processes and computer systems, but also, so from what accounting details is available, what is your procedures, your SOPs, and all of those things that's in place between all your departments, with all your stakeholders within your company. And then lastly, it looks at your financial status or your resources. So yeah, at minimum, from a financial audited statement perspective or equivalent, depending on your type of business. And then also like your domestic taxes and everything is up to date, obviously. So that is one of the critical things. So again, just looking at the top benefits, a few items have been identified, and I will talk a bit in more detail. I can show you the comparison between the 2 levels. Then from a level 2 perspective, level 2 is a bit more enhanced. It looks at much more criteria. It definitely looks after your building and premises security. So not just from your documents and your company, but it actually looks at the buildings, the actual how the cargo is stored and all of that information, who your trading partners is within the supply chain. It looks after your crisis management and your recovery procedures. It looks after your exchange and confidentiality, your personal security, cargo and your cargo movement and security. And then also, yeah, so from a training, risk education and threat awareness is that type of arrangement. And then again, looking at overall corporate governance within your space. So basically looking at, and I'll summarize it here. So, but basically, if you look at it from a summary perspective, you know, your level 1, your first accreditation steps, and you have to do the one to go to the second one. Obviously, that provides you with a client manager. It prioritizes your TDN and VDN applications, reduce security amounts, reduce inspections, exemption and of embargo inspection fees. It provides flexible inspection arrangements, expedited the processes. You can actually use the unique SARS logo on your documentation to make it quite visible that you are AO. And it's just not for South Africa, it's to recognize on the other side of the fence, mutual recognition with all the major trading partners that's available. And I'll explain that a bit later. And then obviously with national government parties. So if you look at level 2, it will also include all the benefits that you have under level 1. The exemption of security payments, the special or extra attendance. So from a no charge perspective, you know, you get prioritized, there's exemptions on certain of the cargo and your based on your business relationship. There's fewer inspections on compliance and security. There's expedited refund and drawback processing, quarterly trade statistics, reduced cyclical compliance audits, extension of validity of license issues, targeted training sessions, mutual recognition by others, and again, the mutual recognitions, and then obviously other government parties. So with the tangible or the, you know, from a trader perspective, we have engaged with several of our traders that actually have participated on both the levels, and, you know, and also across countries, not just in South Africa. And really the biggest benefits to date is just really the intervention on inspections and stops, and the reduced security amounts that had to be lodged. Because again, you know, we're talking about the expense of trading in this environment or in the international supply chain. Those were the high costly items for members to really, you know, to keep up financially, to have that in place. So I think, you know, in all respect, I think why there was lots of non-compliance in those areas, because it was just extremely expensive to keep the security amounts up to date with you know, the growth in your cargo volume and stuff. But yeah, so I think overall, if you can do the comparison, it is very interesting to see that there is really fantastic benefits out there. We've seen literally from just a reporting perspective across all of, from a clientele perspective, a trader perspective, the number of interventions from a documentary inspection means that, you know, there's a case, and for the people that knows the EDI or the pre-clearance procedure with SARS, that I can put it into a case or a documentary inspection. You know, you were working with anything between 4 and, well, an average of 4 hours, but it could go longer. And that time that it takes to get it resolved is quite expensive for the trade. So we could see the number of stops really encountered is you know, it's actually, it's not applicable anymore. It's like literally gone down 100%, not 100%, but it's close to 100%. So yeah, so that is just a summary of what the 2 accreditations would provide you. And there's obviously, as I said, substantial benefits, especially from a revenue perspective. These are the soft items, but definitely a benefit. So I'm not going to go through all of them, but basically there's a few mutual recognitions already been concluded by South Africa Customs with various countries, And basically, I think for me, the highlight personally was the SACU one. It was long awaited. I think because we are just such close trading partners, it was just way overdue. And it's a pity that it wasn't done earlier, but it is done now. So on the 31st of May, a very momentous moment, we Botswana, Eswatini, Lesotho, Namibia, and South Africa actually did sign the mutual recognition. I was very honored to be part of that session. So I took this picture of, on the left, you can see Mr. Beyer-Strauss and Mr. Kieswetter, and obviously with Namibia, Botswana, and Namibia and Eswatini. So yeah, wonderful, wonderful experience, and well done to them for getting that done. So yeah, so the AEO, then obviously if you become part of the AEO, it will also then have the benefit of leveraging off the mutual recognition that's in place. And so there's a few, there's Uganda, you've got the China one, and so forth. So we've got quite a few that's already been signed. So one need to start leveraging off that, Yolandi. As I said, we've got this in place, so we need to start really working smarter, simply better, faster, as they say. So basically, just from a self-assessment perspective, so the procedure really to participate or to start this journey, you will be asked to complete a year 186 with all the required self-assessment questionnaires and supporting documents. As I said, when I started off, it is a 3-year supporting document audit. So you need to be readily available with all that information. It takes in roughly about 7 days for that whole accreditation to be taking place, but obviously we've seen longer timelines due to whatever the information is not available. But from a perfect world perspective, it's quite a quick auditing process, where they then will audit and validate, and then it goes through a committee, and then you will get your status. It's offered for 5 years, but obviously any contravention of your obligations towards becoming an AEO is absolutely critical. So you need to make sure that it happens and stays in place, and it's an ongoing, it's an ongoing engagement. So yeah, so that's basically in a nutshell is just from a self-assessment. I've gone through that, and I can have any more information if you want to. So that's it from my perspective. I don't know, hey, we will take questions and answers at the end.
Thank you so much, Magda. This was great. Yeah, can you kindly take questions during the questions and answers session? We appreciate we can do that for the sake of time. But Magda, I think, yes, it's very wise to say that I should become a lower risk to customs. That's absolutely benefits in that one. And thank you for sharing this. It's a well supported and a well documented presentation. So thank you very much for that. Knowledge is paramount, throughput to your organization, and clearly if you AEO compliant, then definitely it's going to make life much easier and cheaper for you and faster. Thank you, Magda. We really appreciate it. So, ladies and gents, back to our program. We're going to take a short break, but before we take this short break, you can see we've got our first competition now, the spring quiz. And now you might be the winner of a box wine, not a bottle of wine, a box of wine. And Audrey Hennen from Global Trade Solution will be in contact with the winner to determine your selection or your preference in terms of wine. But how it's going to work now, I'm going to ask you a question related to our sponsors and associates. And the first person answering the question right in the chat room will be the winner of the prize. And now these are the organizations that's now relevant in terms of what we're going to do here. I need to just get my eye on the chat room here. Right. And we need to see now who's going to be the first winner of our quiz, sponsored by Global Trade Solution. And the question now is, I'm looking for an acronym used by a certain association that's in formal alliance with the Transport Forum. This association, they say they are the representative of service providers throughout the express supply chain. Who are they? What is the acronym? Here we go, Yolanda. Let me see, was it Yolanda the first one? Oh, no, it was Masela Ledwaba. So Masela Ledwaba, you actually the winner of this. Yolanda, you were close, but Masela, she actually won this one. So let me just make a note here. Masela, our Henning will be in contact and determine what is your preference in terms of wine. So congratulations to Marcella for winning this prize. So ladies and gents, let's take a short break of 10 minutes. I'll put up a clock for us so that I can see you again in 10 minutes time. Enjoy the break, grab that cup of coffee. Thank you very much. All right, ladies and gents, let's take our seats again. We're going to continue our program. So our next presenter is Mr. Werner van Rooyen. He's the Chief Operating Officer of the Fresh Produce Export Forum. He's going to talk about mitigating of challenges hampering growth in exports from fresh produce perspective. Thank you very much, Werner.
Thank you, Harry. Let me just get to my screen. Share screen one. Is my screen sharing?
So then you should swap presenter and slides. So we go to the top at display settings.
Presenter and slides.
Yeah, swap
presenter.
There we go. Perfect.
There you go. Excellent.
Thank you.
So thank you so much, Harry, for this incredible platform. And I think it's great sharing ideas and speaking about challenges that we experience as well. But not from my side. I'm not going to only focus on the challenges. It's how we overcome those challenges that's, I think, the most important, specifically here in South Africa. So in terms of that, I think we've got much to do. So yes, I'm Werner van Rooyen, and I'm going to take you a little bit to the commercial and the actual business private sector side of the export environment in South Africa, specifically fresh produce and fresh fruit. I'll be dealing with the macro environment firstly, risks globally and locally. Then we look at the challenges, and I'm going to just point towards what we're doing from a private sector to mitigate these challenges. And then a quick focus, some interesting facts on the consumer and fresh produce trade in general. And then the opportunities that we create from a private sector base. And you will see that there's so much synergies from the previous speakers, Dr. van der Kerk, Yolanda and Magda as well, in my presentation. So first of all, when we deal with the macro environment, I think it's important that we look at agribusiness confidence. And this is the Agribusiness Confidence Index from the Agricultural Business Chamber of South Africa. Now, if you can see from the slide and the graph that for 3 consecutive quarters, business confidence dropped significantly under the 50-point mark. Now, the 50-point mark is your mark that stipulates where business is favorable towards agricultural outlook in the future or non-favorable. And in this case, business is slightly pessimistic on the outlook of agriculture in South Africa. However, in the last quarter, agricultural confidence jumped by 6 points. So that indicates that agriculture is finding a way to operate in this challenging environment. That is a positive note to start with. However, we need to move out of this mitigating challenging operational conditions environment and start to shine above the 50-point mark.
I'm just going to show. Sorry, just switch off that green dialog box. There's Zoom meeting using the webcam. You just switch it off.
Fantastic.
Thanks.
100%. Thanks, Harry. Secondly, I'm just going to picture unemployment in South Africa. And I think here lies a great opportunity. Now, this is a challenge in South Africa. It's a challenge for our economy as well. And you can see there from the COVID-19, 35.3% unemployment rate in January 2022. Although it decreased, it's still very high in South Africa. Now, this is where the agricultural sector really can bring their expertise and also the assistance working with government to the table. So it's a labor-intensive product, the agricultural sector, especially the export agricultural sector. And the fruit industry. It helps with job creation, poverty alleviation, and it creates a multiplier effect for job creation on a farm level. And that helps with rural economic development as well overall. So this can only be realized if we fully partner with government to make this happen. So interest rates, and I think we all know, and is hampered by the interest rates of the recent times that we saw 10 consecutive hikes of interest rates. Now, the South African Reserve Bank does a stunning job to stabilize our currency. However, I think in terms of the inflation target as well, it's not necessary to increase interest rates any further, doing it for the sake of inflation. Inflation dropped since October 2022, and we are already at 4.7% inflation in South Africa. So it's well within the South African Reserve Bank target of 3 to 6%. So in my view, I think this is running up the cost of finance as well in our sector, and also disinvestment in agriculture as a whole. Looking at inflation rates worldwide, and this was significant for us as an export sector in the beginning of the year as well. Inflation worldwide last year was skyrocketing, and the IMF luckily anticipated a drop in inflation from 9% in 2022, and European countries haven't seen that figure at all. So we were very, very worried in terms of our export product, 90% or 60% going to the European Union. But luckily, inflation is dropping because inflation will erode the buying power as well. I'll come to that in the next slide. But European inflation hasn't seen this spike, as you see from the right-hand graph, in April 2020 to July 2022. It was a significant spike of inflation worldwide, but specifically also in our European markets. So, like I said, the inflation erodes buying power, and this figures was taken from Rabobank and Eurostat as well. You will see there that 100 euros over time, how much it lost value in the last couple of years, especially. And if you look from 2021 to 2022, there's a significant drop as well. If you look at the European or the real wages that's declining in the Netherlands, Germany, and the Euro area, you will see a significant drop over that time period as well. So that concerns us as exporting to these markets, predominantly our traditional trading markets, where the consumer's buying power is not what it used to be. So that was a red light for us in our industry, and that's some of the challenges that we need to work on. And I will come to the possible solutions of this later on. But first, let's deal with the risks our industry faces, and I think it's general to any export industry as well, and then dive into the challenges. So the World Economic Forum published their report in the beginning of the year, and you will see there on the left-hand side the global ranking of risks faced by the world. Is the cost of living in the short term, natural disasters, and geo-economic confrontation. That's the top 3 in the short term. The long-term view of the World Economic Forum is, as we all know, mitigating climate change, adapting to climate change, the failure thereof, and also natural disasters. And I think that's evident, as we've seen recently as well in South Africa. In South Africa, specific to South Africa country, there was an opinion survey by the WEF, World Economic Forum, on the risk for South Africa. And number one, state collapse is a great concern for us. We as a private sector cannot go without the state, and the state cannot go without the private sector. So this is a significant risk for us as well. And we all see the challenges with state-owned entities in South Africa, especially. The debt crisis, Dr. van Niekerk also highlighted the debt crisis. This is a world phenomenon, but especially in South Africa, it sits at number 2 as a risk for our country. And you will see the cost of living crisis is also prevalent, and for us specifically, and I think Yolanda also highlighted it, the collapse of services and public infrastructure, and that's our ports and our roads, and our railway system, and I will come to that later as well. So from a South African export perspective, we look at various risks or various risk that is not only export driven, but also producer driven. So you will see the increase in cost that we had lately is enormous. It has an enormous on farm level impact. And that just erodes the price you can get for your fresh produce in the international market. So we struggled with a high increase in cost in fertilizer, especially. Luckily, that has come down now with about 45%. But still, it had a significant impact on exports, and that was due to the Russian-Ukraine invasion. We also dealt with higher than normal shipping costs that erode the price we receive for our fresh produce. The minimum wage on farm level has a significant impact on wages on a farm level. And that also just increases your price of production. And of course, electricity costs, although reasonably lower in South Africa, we do see a sharp increase in that. And the late fuel increases as well, that just adds to the cost chain for us. Secondly, I think the other risk for us is industrial action. And that is not only specific to South Africa. The Port of Rotterdam last year, the end of last year, experienced also industrial action where their truck drivers also blocked the port. You see that in the Netherlands as well, where there was industrial action against the EU Green Deal, where the government is just imposing regulations. So that's a major risk for us. It creates an uncertain environment. The blueberries specifically exported from South Africa last year in October, where Transnet had industrial action from their side. That impacted us with the fruit industry losing millions of rands because of industrial action. Our product is time sensitive, it's cold sensitive, and industrial action is certainly not what we would like in our environment. Plant health and other regulations, there was in the beginning of the year big question marks on the BMA. I think that was dealt with constructively, engaging with government on the specific matters that we need to see from government side, and also the implementation thereof on our side. We also deal with a lot of plant health and disease regulations worldwide. It's becoming a phenomenon. They are referring to it as a plant health era, and also looking at food on a sanitary basis and a quality basis as well. But a lot of the countries uses plant health as a trade barrier in some cases. So it's very important for us to be able to manage the risk from a South African perspective and address it thoroughly in the production processes of the fresh produce export sector. Economic slowdown and inflation, we highlighted inflation earlier, but economic slowdown, as Dr. van der Kerk also showed, was evident. Like Dr. van der Kerk also highlighted, the volume may be increased what we export, but the value obtained is just not there. And that directly redirect into investment into agriculture in South Africa. So that's also a risk for us. Climate change, as you would know, and sustainability is becoming an ever-increasing compliance measure for our industry. And we are working with our international membership organizations to mitigate the risk of any sustainability matters. Geopolitical tension and conflict, I don't have to elaborate on that anymore. We all know what's taking place in the world of today. But I think it's something that we are taking cautiously in mind when we export our product. So the challenges in slowing growth in the fresh produce exports generally, and I think all of us will agree, infrastructure and logistics in South Africa is at an all-time low, and that hampers export growth. It really takes away the precious Ubuntu from South Africa if we can't use the vein of and the heart of our exports to the extent we must. And this is troublesome for us as well, and specifically Cape Town, with the Port of Cape Town with equipment that's near end of life. But the key challenge there is working together with Transnet, which industry does very well. And we have seen some results as well addressing this specific challenge. I think private sector participation is extremely important. We've seen that successfully now, also taking shape in the Port of Durban and also in Port Elizabeth as well. But we really would like to see it on the Port of Cape Town side to be extended further. Optimizing economic utilization of Transnet commercial property and other near port facilities is another key challenge for us in terms of infrastructure, which is taking shape. Maersk took over the operations of the Belcon facility, which is a Transnet facility, and we certainly support that expansion from a logistics perspective. All other ports in the world work from inland port terminal feeding into the port system, and I think that's critically important for us to get the product out of the country. And it's partnerships like these that will really transform logistics in South Africa. And I think South Africa is at the point where the mind shift and change towards making logistics work in South Africa is critically important. We also support the NLCC. It's not a key challenge. It's the National Logistics Crisis Committee, which was announced by President Ramaphosa. However, in terms of the Port of Cape Town, there's still not any focus on the Port of Cape Town in the National Logistics Crisis Committee, and we're working very hard to make that a reality. Because the significant fruit basket nationally is about 50% goes out of the Port of Cape Town. So it's critically important for our industry. Then another challenge for us as well, and I think the previous speakers also highlighted this, is the lack of trade agreements and high tariffs. That's actually making us not so competitive in our export markets. So you will see from the screen as well, this is my apology for that spelling error for Australia. You will see all our Southern Hemisphere competitors, Australia, New Zealand, Peru, Chile, Argentina, Uruguay, as free trade agreements with these powerhouse of consumer demand and developing economies where they export their fruit, where South Africa have no existing free trade agreement or preferential trade agreement with these countries. So this is actually for us, it's really important for us to start negotiating, working with government to negotiate for free trade agreements, to export our product also more competitively to these developing markets where we see most of the development going towards. The Far East and the Middle East is very important markets for us, and so is Southeast Asia as well. So negotiating favorable trade agreements and navigating trade and regulations can be very challenging. But I think as South Africa, we need to start somewhere, and we're coming from a low base, so we can make a really good indent into this. Now, the fruit industry and growing fresh produce exports require, unfortunately, high capital investment. And this is where we also start to look at the access to finance. We have a fruit industry value chain roundtable, looking at how we can partner with the DTIC, with the Department of Agriculture, and with banks as well, in order to facilitate in the access to finance. So the high capital investment, it depends on the specific fruit type that you export. However, the average estimated cost to establish one orchard or a hectare is about 265,000 Rand. And then for each and every hectare, the maintenance cost is 50,000 Rand. So it's an enormous cost. You know, while the interest rates is very high, the cost of finance is also very high. And that just creates a significant barrier to entry for smallholder farmers as well. Then also in the fresh produce industry, it takes about 5 to 7 years and a lot of cash flow to operate and your business and make it export ready for that fruit or the fruit trees to bear fruit for export. So that's very important also to take in consideration as the cash flow from a private sector perspective. Yes, ability to provide support and extension services is another challenge we have. The capacity within government is also not always there to implement regulations effectively and monitor it throughout the chain. So we require the right people, the right skill, right placing and adequate numbers to support extension services in agriculture in South Africa. And there's great examples where industry is working with government institutions like the Department of Agriculture to make this a reality. The South African Fruit Industry Associations, which include ourselves and Fruit South Africa, has developed an electronic certification system to electronically certify fruit for export. And that is a significant milestone for South Africa that we developed with the Department of Agriculture and now I think running in its 4th or 5th year already successfully in electronically certifying our export. And that's how we're going to create that capacity and extension services to work together. As I highlighted, climate change, unexpected weather patterns, we are returning to the El Nino phase of the cycle, and that is like we would like to call it in the industry the dry cycle. We are at the end now of the La Nina cycle, which was the wet cycle. So you will see here, this is from the FOA, the Food Agricultural Organization, a field map of dry patches and wetter patches, which the El Nino cycle brings. And this is almost a 3 to 5 year cycle. So we are going to enter it now at the end of 2023, and then for another 3 to 5 years. And you will see there in the northern part of South Africa, we can expect a possible drier spells and hotter spells as well that impact our crop. And with that, that creates water stress on the fruit-bearing trees, which limits our ability to export big fruit volumes. And also unexpected weather patterns brings about pest and disease. And that makes it very difficult to control as well from a phytosanitary and a sanitary perspective in South Africa. So that just ramps up the cost of doing business, but it's something that we need to address. And I think we do it thoroughly, and I will get to the opportunity there later. Competitive pricing, not going to stand still on it. It's a very commercial aspect of our business as well, which is challenging. Price competition with other export countries can be very fierce, and we need to balance the competitive pricing to cover production costs. And if I can give you an example here, we've noted in some stone fruit categories that the export price obtained in some of the European markets does not cover production costs theoretically. And that is a growing concern for us. So from industry sides, it's our responsibility to create more awareness of the fruit category from South Africa as well, and try to push up that price received and get our production cost as low as possible. Market access and trade barriers, I think the previous speakers alluded to it as well. Tariff, non-tariff barriers, trade restrictions can limit market access significantly and make exports more costly. We've got a lot of non-tariff barriers also to deal with in the industry. I'm not going to touch on those, but also tariff barriers like high tariffs in Korea, for instance, as well, and Thailand that hampers our ability to export. Recently, successful market access initiatives, so we must highlight the positives. We've got access last year for pears to China, that was signed last year. We've got access that was signed now at the BRICS Summit for avocados to China, which we are very glad, and we're going to make use of that opportunity as well. And also, we signed citrus access for Philippines. So our citrus has regained access from 2013 in the Philippines as well, I think 2 years ago. So that's the highlights we have. In the process, we are in the final stages of access of avocados to Japan, and that is pending outcome imminently. We also are in the final negotiation phases for citrus access to Vietnam. And all these market access initiatives from a fresh produce perspective is what's going to create that foreign revenue for South Africa. So we definitely put all our effort and allocation of resources towards getting new markets, optimizing existing markets, and retaining also existing markets. We're also working tirelessly on apple and pear access to Thailand, and we started a draft phytosanitary protocol with the Thai government, and we're looking forward to what that can bear for South African fruit industry. Table grapes to Philippines is also in the final stages. We will most certainly look at the end of the year having a final outcome on that. Of course, electricity supply, it's key to our business. We need to keep our fresh produce fresh. We need to keep them cooled and maintain the cold chain as well. And load shedding in 4-hour blocks without power creates irrigation challenges for us on a farm level. It also hampers packing and cooling for our industry. An example here is in the beginning of the year, the table grape industry experienced significant levels of load shedding, I think stage 6, and that hampered about 30% of the production on the Orange River side of table grapes, of the packing and cooling specifically. And all of that, we have a fast-moving consumer good, which is fresh fruit that needs to be kept fresh. And to be able to mitigate these challenges goes a long way. So another challenge for us is political instability and protectionism. We're seeing protectionism as a trend all over the globe, and especially now with governments becoming more and more protectionistic. So political instability and economic downturns affect either the exporting or importing country. So it also affects us back home. So we also notice a shift from globalization to deglobalization in our export environment. So yes, let me take you through to the consumer focus and fresh produce trends, and I'm almost done, Harry. I'm quickly going to highlight these two aspects and then go to the opportunities, which I think is most important for us. So what we notice is a decrease in household purchases below 2019 levels, specific to USA and European markets, which we are very active in. And that scared us quite a bit. And that is also due to the inflation that erodes the buying power of the consumer. So other trends we also notice is the convenience that remains the number one preference for any consumer, despite lower income. Any consumer would like convenience, and that's what we focus on in the fresh produce sector, and also from a South Africa perspective as well in fresh produce. So what we also notice is consumers with lower disposable income, the cheaper fruit not trumping market share over the more expensive fruit. So we don't see that because, and that's the anomaly we found in the sector as well, from the consumer on the other side, the consumer will not buy more apples as to blueberries, even though their disposable income is higher. So it's quite an anomaly. We haven't seen this type of scenario in the international market, but it was evident, especially in the beginning of the year. We also saw increased food service sales, and mostly applicable to vegetables in the markets of in the European markets and the USA markets. That was also evident. So fresh produce trends that we also noticed in terms of financing, food security, digitization, and smart farming. In terms of financing, the trend that we see is a lot of venture capitalists start to invest in agriculture. And that takes a lot of investment, and specifically in your European environment. If I can take an example here, is over the last 15 years in Spain, there was a lot of significant investment in agriculture from venture capitalists. Food security, like I mentioned, all the countries is becoming protectionistic. They're becoming aware of food security and self-sufficiency and reducing food waste. And they want to build their own food supply. And I think South Africa is geared in a perfect way to be able to supply countries with the necessary food security they would require. So digitization, accelerated digitization that we see in terms of visibility and also traceability in our food system. So that's becoming ever more important, and there's a lot of players now, and the agtech sector is really taking effect in our industry. Smart farming, increased focus is on smallholder farm empowerment, smart, efficient, and sustainable farming, and retailers are pressing for this in the international arena we're operating in. So this is just interesting facts from our sector that we can share with you. So lastly, I'm going to just touch on the opportunities. We mentioned all the challenges, but we must look at the brighter future, and we need to look at South Africa into the opportunities. So our sector has implemented a renewed focus on delivering excellent quality fruit. I think it's very important. We spent a lot of funds into research and development, and also improving on-farm production. So adopting and improving practices on the farm level. Post-harvest protocols and product handling is a significant aspect of our business. And I think there's a lot of resources allocated to make that happen. So quality and crop control, like I mentioned, pest and disease with changing weather patterns is very, very hard to control. And we spend a lot of time in research and also on farm to control pest and disease prevalence in some seasons. We need an optimal cold chain in order to produce a fresh product in the consumer hands, in a retail shelf in Europe, for instance. And we need to maintain that throughout the packing facility to the marketplace. So from the industry side, we have a post-harvest innovation program that we partner with the Department of Science and Technology, and it's an 80 million program over a three-year period that we do research and development on post-harvest aspects in the industry. We also do a lot of cultivar consolidation. So we always say the whole supply chain begins 25 years ago, with research and development into cultivars, new cultivars as well, and also consolidating cultivars aligned with the global market trends. I think that's a big drive for us to advocate that in the industry. I think the opportunity for us, and specifically addressing logistics, addressing input costs, industrial action, policy missteps, energy shortages, collaboration is very important for us. And I think that we really take a lot of time to see where we can partner, where we can grow, because we need each other in South Africa to grow. And specifically address these challenges. These challenges is harmonious between each and every sector. But I think in terms of our sector, we really take some time to establish groupings to address that. One example is the Western Cape Deciduous Fruit work group or forum that uses a platform and a joint initiative to engage with Transnet, the Western region as well. And we had some successful outcomes from our interactions. And this is the way to go forward as a nation as well. So we partner also with key stakeholders, ACBIS as a partner, provincial government, and also national government on ministerial level. We also have a memorandum of cooperation with SAF that we establish. We are members of the Cape Chambers, and also we have membership in international organizations. And this is the way you can mitigate challenges, by sharing ideas, having this platform like the Transport Forum as well, to get the ideas out, think about them, and create the opportunities to mitigate these challenges. So market access, like mentioned, is very important. We do market development in emerging markets, promotion and campaigns as well in those markets to optimize and create the awareness for the fruit. I think in our value chain, we increasing the use of technology, and that's very important going forward, and especially in the next 10 years. I think we're going to see a significant disruptive change in the increase in adoption of technology, and in agriculture, it's already showing. So we investigate those and see how we can use them. The domestic market in South Africa, and that's now apart from exports, is also growing. And we need to take care of that growth domestically. And I think that's important for us to know. New markets in Far East Asia, Russia, and Africa. South Africa is very close to the developing world of where the powerhouse of economics can become evident. And we're close to the Middle East and the Far East. And that's our competitive advantage above our competitors. So yes, finally, I think the best way to approach and anticipate these challenges is to consider scenario planning for the future, surrounding yourself with the right institutions and stakeholders, and address the complex challenges we are facing today. I think that's important, and that will be my take-home message for today. So yes, in conclusion, South Africa, a remarkable country in many ways. So many changes, but the one constant is the great fruit. So I hope you eat it and enjoy our great fruit. And this is actually from a consumer that said that through a survey that was done internationally. So we pride ourselves in the great fruit we have. So thank you, Harry. That is all from my side. I don't know if I went over my allocated time, but I'm willing to take any questions later. Thank you.
Thank you, Werner. Yes, you went over, but it's worth our while. We're definitely going to do our scenario planning and eat the fruit. It's so much informative. Yeah, it's so interesting. You talk about, you don't plant a tree and immediately bear fruit. You need to wait, and that cash flow is a serious problem. And yeah, we're learning from you guys. Thank you very much for sharing this with us. And I'm sure people are going to have a look again on YouTube on this presentation, and looking forward to asking questions during the panel discussion. Thank you so much, Werner. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Ladies and gents, last but not least, we've got Mr. Anton Eccles. He's a solution architect at Global Trade Solution. He's going to tell us about success stories of a digitized export supply chain. Thank you very much, Anton.
Thank you, Harry, and good afternoon to everyone. I'm aware I'm just sitting between you and lunch, so let me get going with presentation. I hope everyone can see my screen. Yeah, so my name is Anton Eccles. So I work as the solution architect, putting together solutions for Global Trade Solution. So I'd like to just share some thoughts around digitized export supply chains and you know how they can be used to potentially address some of the challenges that I think a lot of these speakers have spoken to earlier. So I think within any export supply chain, but I think any international supply chain is no different. We have a number of actors that work in the supply chain, and anyone who's spent any time in this industry will know that you have freight forwarders, you have multiple different modes of transport with different service providers in that space. You have your customer, you have customs, and you have other governmental agencies. So that would be an acronym for parties like agriculture, standards inspectors, any number of other phytosanitary or other sometimes trade barriers that there are in the supply chain. So, and they all need information, and we as the exporters require information from these various actors. The challenge typically is that the flow of information that goes between these various different parties is often a spider web of information, sort of as per the diagram below, where you've got multiple different flows of information, going through various different parties. And traditionally, a lot of the time, those flows of information involve emails, scanned documents, spreadsheets. You still see an incredible amount of spreadsheets, within any international supply chain area. Scary enough as well is the sort of reliance on querying of original documentation. And it's so scary how we see this so often where, people request original documents, but often they are just, printouts of a Word document or an Excel spreadsheet or Excel document with a stamp on it that sort of deems this document as original. And how safe and secure is that really? And how original is that really? So, I think, despite all the sort of technological advances, you often still see these kind of characteristics within an international supply chain. I think the one advantage that you as the exporter would sit at in the supply chain is that you're often the originator of a lot of the data. So you do have a real opportunity to re-envision how this looks and how you could share this information better. I think there's a lot of research that's been done, and depending on which papers you read or which articles you read, the figures differ, but so anything from $3 to $6 billion per annum could be cut from the industry by digitizing, some of these trade flows. There's surveys that talk anything between 15 to 30% of your supply chain costs could be saved through digitizing the supply chain. So I think there's no sort of doubt that there is an opportunity that sits, within the supply chain to digitize some of these process flows and digitize some of these manual documentation that exists. One study I just want to highlight is a recent Commonwealth study that looked at, again, digitizing trade flow, what impact that could have to countries within the Commonwealth. So what's interesting to see, and sorry, this graphic is really small, but South Africa sort of sits sort of roughly in the middle of this graph here, where you've got a potential of about 15% cost reduction if you look at it as a percentage of total trade, from digitizing trade flows. I think the advantage that we as South Africa and if I look a little bit broader to our regional sort of counterparts as Southern Africa or Sub-Saharan Africa is generally, any digitization process definitely accrues higher savings to us than maybe some of your more traditionally first world countries, where I think a lot of those low-hanging fruits have been taken already. And I think it's a lot more difficult to extract real value out of that. So I think there's a real opportunity for us to look at how do we digitize that. So just a very practical example, I think, of why digitization is sometimes very, can save a lot of money is, and save a lot of time, I think, is, we often see in trade that one of the key documents that, get passed around in international supply chain is your commercial invoice. So obviously that's the basis for most export transactions within the supply chain. So just before I go into the actual example, one needs to bear in mind that for customs, you have three key pillars of customs. And the one is tariff, whereby we need to determine, against what's known as the harmonized tariff code, how do we classify these products? The second one is the value of the product. That's maybe a bit of an easier one because typically an invoice will show you the value of the products. And then the origin, so where was the goods manufactured? And why are these three things important? Because they ultimately determine what duty you need to pay on those products. And so often you get presented, with an invoice that looks like this. You may be the third or fourth person in the supply chain, and now you need to make a determination of what these products are. So it would be interesting to see, and it's a pity we're sitting in a virtual forum, but if anyone could actually guess what these products are in fact. And this is often the basis on which customs clearing happens throughout the world. And one needs to bear in mind that you as the exporter or the importer, depending on which side of the transaction you're sitting at, are still ultimately liable for any mistakes made during this process. And so you can quite easily imagine how, such limited information can lead to mistakes and lead to penalties and lead to incorrect duties. So just out of interest for those that maybe were looking at these products and wanted to know what they are, the first one is a TV and a bracket for a TV that sits on the wall. And the second one is actually a pair of curtains, or a set of curtains rather, so nothing to do with ducks or eggs in that case. So, it's so easy based on this limited information to get things wrong. And when things go wrong, you as the exporter are often very far removed from that physical supply chain and are then having to try and figure out, how do we resolve this and where did it go wrong? And what impact does that have on my cost and my lead times? And what impact does it have ultimately on my customer? So I think within that context, and I kind of don't want to really repeat, I suppose, what Yolanda said earlier and some of the other speakers, but, digitizing the supply chain, it's not a silver bullet. It certainly doesn't solve a lot of the physical challenges that we have in Southern Africa. The port performance is a widely publicized issue. I think previous speakers spoke to that in terms of the fruit industry. We know we've had significant disruptions. Certainly in 2021, we had the disruptions at Durban Harbour, that caused significant delays. And we often have congestion at any number of borders. This particular border is the Zambian side of Kasumbalesa border post, and you'll see, I don't know how well this will play, but this is a video that I took earlier in the year of just queues and queues and queues of trucks. And these queues will sometimes go 20, 30 kilometers long, 2 trucks wide of trucks sitting in a queue. So certainly digitization doesn't necessarily solve the physical constraints that we have, but certainly I think there's a lot to be said of how digitization of supply chains can assist with optimizing the assets that we do have. So things like smart borders, things like making sure that you pre-clear before you export, to make sure that things don't go wrong at the point of export, certainly do help to prevent and utilize the assets that we do have better in the space. Okay, so I think I've spoken to some of these, but some of the key challenges that we do have in international supply chain and exports in general is as I said, long lead times, and that's based on the fact that we often have multiple modal transport. So we have shipping and road freight involved. We have inconsistent lead times. my pointer on. Inconsistent lead times, we've got, in terms of road freight, border congestion, border crossings. Also, visibility is a challenge if you compare it to sort of local supply chains. So, where is my order? When is it going to arrive? When is it going to arrive from my customer? You've got multiple third parties, and typically that information between the third parties and your different service providers is handed over manually. And therefore, often by the time you get the information, it's already outdated. High costs. So when things go wrong, at the far end of the world, you've got demurrage, penalties and so on. So that can lead to high costs. And then ultimately, as I said, compliance. So ensuring that you're compliant with various different regulations, whether it be customs, phyto, ensuring that you keep all your documentation in good order, that you've got a good track record of that. And again, typically these are done manually with physical documents. And then ultimately bearing in mind that you as the exporter are still liable and need to keep all of that compliance in place to ensure. So I think just based on that context of some of the challenges and how some of the challenges that we sit in with the manual supply chain and certainly within our Southern African context, I think there's a number of trends that affect supply chain. I think a lot of these trends are fairly widely talked about in terms of fourth industrial revolutions and so on. But I think some of the key things that are impacting supply chain at the moment and international supply chain and how they're being used, is sort of summarized on this. So I think, first of all, cloud computing. So things like, software as a service, the more frequent use of APIs and ensuring that we connect our applications together and making it easier to connect applications and integrate and digitize processes. Sorry, big data, I'll come back to that. I think Internet of Things, very important, again, within this space. So your smart devices, but I think more importantly, your connected devices. So giving you better visibility, if you use it correctly, of what's happening in your supply chain. And then, sorry, I realize my little diagram here is a really rather scary looking robot, but I think artificial intelligence is having a big impact on the supply chain. So I think particularly around robotics and automation, as well as some of the AI tools that are being used to optimize and better plan and use assets in the supply chain. So where these are being used is allowing you to integrate better with your third-party service providers. So I think cloud computing APIs allow you to create that ecosystem of connected applications and service providers, and gives you that ability to easier at least create a digitized supply chain. And we see this a lot, automation of back office functions. So I think robotics and automated processes are being used a lot to automate currently. And we see it a lot at our clients where processes that were typically done manually by people are now being automated a lot through robotics tools. I think you'd be surprised at how much it's being used, even in places outside of South Africa. I mean, we've seen it in places throughout Africa where it's being used, and it'd be actually quite interesting whether customs authorities or governmental authorities realize how much information that they're receiving is actually being submitted by a robot at the back of a process that's happening. So I think we see a lot of that happening in this space. Obviously, digitization of previously manual documentation, and then improvement in asset utilization. So I think through cloud computing and the use of AI on that, you're being able to utilize assets better by sharing information about those assets. And that kind of combines with the second or the next 2 points, is where having better visibility of your supply chain allows you to plan and manage your assets better. And then also that kind of Uberization of supply chain through digital freight forwarders, 4PLs. You see a lot of that, particularly in the road freight side, but also you've seen the rise of digital freight forwarders, some more successful than others. But certainly you see a lot of that. And also a lot of the rise of these visibility service providers like if you products like Project 44 or 4Kites, Shipio, that provide you visibility of where your vessels are with predictive ETA. So there's a lot of those tools that are coming into the market, have been in the market, that you can plug into your supply chain and think about how you use those tools to better plan, better manage, and also provide a better customer service at the end of the day. So how does this relate into customs? Because ultimately, when we export, one of our big stakeholders is customs. So I think there's a couple of things I don't want to repeat. I think a lot of these have been said, but so Magda spoke quite a lot about AEO and mutual recognition agreements. I think data science, things like advanced rulings are leading customs to better understand you as the exporter. So, these tools allow them to know their customer better. And then a lot of these other tools also allow them to understand the supply chain better. So after knowing you better, they're able to actually understand that individual supply chain better. So, there's projects on the go for customs data exchange. There's also customs exchanging data with other governmental agencies within this supply chain. So kind of single windows, as it were. Third-party data sources, getting information via IoT devices. I'll talk a little bit more about AEOS and where that comes in, and these sort of digital command centers. So, they're understanding better that the product that's moving through the countries, the export process itself. And then also their customs are very much looking at how they digitize processes. So, for example, there's a process and a project on the go throughout the SADC region to automate and digitize the SADC certificate of origin, which is a great initiative because it's a very manual process and paper-driven process at the moment. Single windows, I think Yolanda also mentioned single windows. So SARS is actually this weekend just launched their single window project with a sort of limited implementation with Dalrod. So SARS is certainly going that route. And other online services, so things like e-filing, online advanced rulings, better access to data. So I think these are some of the things that customs are pushing to digitize their process and basically allow them to have a risk management approach to how they enforce regulations, how they stop particular shipments. And then obviously on the back of that, being able to expedite and automate clearances where you are, for example, an AEO or, and where your supply chain is safe and secure. So this is an example of the EAC command center where they're able to monitor all the vehicles moving in and out of the EAC. They're able to identify, vehicles that, for example, or containers that go off their prescribed route. If there are accidents, they're able to dispatch police or emergency services to a particular vehicle. And they're obviously able to manage that secure supply chain through that. And that's the use of things like e-seals, where they're able to seal the vehicle. And that's really, where IoT combined with your customs and data really come together, because through the use of e-seals and these kind of command centers, you're able to take, advanced digitized data combined with IoT devices and really, leverage that to provide, a lot of these benefits that I spoke about. So how does this work in reality, or in a sort of more supply chain side? So some of the things that we look at, or that customs would be looking at, is within a typical export supply chain. Typically the process would start as the exporter. I think again, there as the exporter, you sit with the majority of the data, you understand the product, you understand how it's packed. You are stealing the container, the vehicle, whatever it may be. And so the process really starts there. And that's where AEO comes in. So AEO, obviously understanding you as the exporter, understanding your service providers, so your transporters, your freight forwarders, and so on, and what is your level of certification. And so ultimately the data that flows from this process flows through ultimately to your customer at the other side. So through that, you would have data being transmitted to a customs authority, who would then share that through single window projects through to various different other governmental agencies. And then we have customs connectivity. So the same data that you're submitting here is then being shared with various different customs authorities through that supply chain. And then ultimately onto the importing side, where the importing customs authority is also then similarly sharing that information with their other governmental agencies, and would also have an understanding of the importer or your customer ultimately, and how secure are they, and how secure are their service providers. And then ultimately through mutual recognition, you'd be able to understand, this whole supply chain and who the actors are, what is the AEO certification of each of those actors. Now, within this context, one needs to understand that, more and more the government agencies are sharing data across the supply chain. So you as the exporter and the private sector, how are you sharing that same data across, the supply chain? So for example, if customs are sharing data, how are we ensuring that the information that I'm sharing with my customer and other service providers is as accurate as the information that's being shared here? The last thing we want to have is a scenario where, I have certain information here, and based on multiple manual handovers, that information becomes out of date, incorrect by the time it's submitted here, and creates a disconnect between the data that we're sharing here versus what's being shared between customs authorities. That gets overlaid with what's called AEO-S, so the secure AEO, where ultimately this would secure the flow of the data between the various different actors in the supply chain. But now we also need to secure the flow of the goods. So that would be based on sealing goods electronically with IoT devices, potential digital records of the sealing process, and then sharing those information throughout the supply chain, combined with things like smart gates, to automate the flow. So that's ultimately where we see customs authorities going, and we need to understand as a private sector, how are we allowing our business to be ready for these types of developments, and how we're positioning ourselves to be ready for this future reality. So where we see the process going is very much looking at as supply chain, whether it's exports or imports, as one process, as one control tower, as it were, where we would look to manage that whole process as one end-to-end flow. So we would look at consolidating and standardizing processes, and removing silos across multiple service providers. So we would then, as the exporter, control that process and share that information digitally with our various different service providers, customs, stakeholders, customers, and then creating this platform where we can manage the data and the process on a digitized platform. So that would be both customs, looking at our compliance, visibility into the supply chain, and also looking at our final costs in the supply chain. So I think some of the things this allows us to do, and I'll just, because I know we are running a little bit out of time, highlight some of the key things. So it allows us to use multiple service providers, but still have a consistent view of the process, despite the fact that we are using multiple service providers. It allows us to pre-verify and customs clear goods before it arrives at borders or at ports. So that would be making sure all permits are in place, the customs clearing is in place before the goods depart, and therefore alleviating these issues of when the truck arrives or when the container arrives at the border. We suddenly then have issues with regulatory processes, and therefore smoothing your process through the supply chain. Improved customer service and visibility by providing a better view into our own process. We're able to provide a better view for our customers at the end of the day, and the better control of our costs and duty, as well as our compliance. So again, kind of similar to where we do is we would look at it from an export perspective, that we manage that process as one singular view of an order from end to end. And as the exporter, we are able to set up this managed supply chain and share information with all our different actors in the supply chain. So we manage that through a control tower where we're able to share our data with the freight forwarders, with our customers, with banks, with OGAs, and with our various different transporters. So we have integrated processes with the integrated platform, and the platform may consist of a number of different components to that platform. So it may be a global trade management solution where we play a lot in, but it could also involve your transport management systems, your business intelligence systems, and so on, and then combine that with your IoT information as well as your analytics, your automation, and so on, to automate as many of these processes as possible. So this would be sort of the architecture of a digital platform to manage this process. So what does this help us, and where does it leverage on those challenges that are highlighted earlier in the presentation? So I think by improving the coordination amongst your own internal departments as well as your service providers, you're able to and ultimately also the regulatory authorities, you're able to improve the consistency of your lead times and also reduce your lead times. And that comes from a consistent process, a digitized process, and that ultimately brings down your lead times. Visibility, so by controlling the whole process end to end and integrating with a number of these different technologies that are available, you're able to get visibility yourself of your order, of your export shipment, and then also obviously share that with your customer and track that through the critical path. So reducing lead times, reduce costs, by ensuring compliance before you export, you reduce the chances of demurrage and penalties and so on. And you can also look at how you optimize the use of trade agreements, rebates, drawbacks, and so on. And then ultimately compliance is throughout those processes. You bake compliance into those processes. So you ensure all the documentation that you require is obtained at the right points, and you digitize those processes along the way so that you have a complete digital record of your shipment, and ensure ultimate compliance to that. So I think through this, just some key sort of points or takeaways from this is, some of this can look quite a daunting prospect, I suppose. There's a lot of technologies, a lot of solutions that would go there, but I don't think you necessarily have to implement it in one go. I think we can look at the low-hanging fruit in our organizations and key partners that we have, and look at how do we automate and digitize those processes. I think I kind of mentioned it earlier, but things like OCR, robotics, a lot of that technology, which is becoming far more accessible, to even non-IT people. So, being able to explore how we use that to implement, improvements in our supply chain and digitize processes, I think is really becoming a lot more accessible, and there's a lot of opportunity there. I think break down silos, and I think these two sort of go hand in hand, and simplify processes. So it's no point necessarily just digitizing an existing process. One also needs to look at how, once you've digitized it or through digitization, how you can simplify that process as well. I think that's a key point. It's no point just digitizing a poor process, otherwise you just end up with a bad outcome faster, as opposed to any significant improvements. I think just people is important. Through this, I think it's important that as an exporter, we need to recognize that again, I'll stress it, that ultimately, from a customs perspective, you are ultimately liable. So being able to understand what your obligations and the customs processes and your regulatory authority requirements are, puts you in a better position to manage these processes. Also bear in mind what Magda was saying earlier around AEO, being able to demonstrate a level of competence or level of understanding of customs puts you in a good position to become AO. And so I think these are key that that as an exporter, if you want to control the process, you can't just hand it over to third parties to run with the process and then, then wonder why at the end of the day, you don't know where something went wrong and why it went wrong. Also, I think people's roles, I think this has been discussed a lot around the fourth industrial revolution and so on, but automation means that roles will change. And instead of data capturers, you have data verifiers, data analysts that look at processes and that. So I think one needs to prepare for that change and prepare your people for that change. Also, good data is important. You can't automate bad data. You're just going to get a bad output. And the old saying, garbage in, garbage out is even truer now than it is ever before. Yeah, and I think also, although this talk is very much export focused, I think, a lot of the concepts and ideas and processes are similar with imports. So look at how you leverage those two together to create critical mass and to sort of lower the cost of any of these kind of technologies that you might implement. So that's my presentation done. I think then hopefully I managed to claw back a little bit of time. So I'll hand back to Harry then to close off. Thanks very much.
Thank you so much, Anton. This was seriously interesting and we learned again quite a lot. I think, well, I can't imagine somebody being in this game without being digitized. Definitely, you won't be able to compete. You will lose out a lot, and it's just it's impossible. So thank you very much for sharing the constraints, the IT trends, and the customs realities. I don't want to waste people's time. I'm quite sure they want to engage in questions and answers of you guys. So, ladies and gents, can we have all our panelists that can kindly unmute and switch on their camera so that I can bring them into the panel, please? Unmute as well, please. We see, there we go. Yeah, unfortunately, Arno can't be with us anymore, but there's the panel. And ladies and gents, you're welcome now to, raise your hand or unmute, and then I should be able to see that you've unmuted. And once I've recognized you, you can ask a question. I already see there are two questions, I think, for Yolanda already in the chat room. So kicking off, I think, we can start reading those, Yolanda. So this is Miles Donnelly asking, with Beitbridge on the Zimbabwe side being renewed, infrastructure and ICT wise, what has been your observations with a renewed modernized border? And do you see this project as a good reference for other borders along the corridor? Now, obviously, this is for Yolanda, but any one of the other panelists can also respond to this. Yolanda, I don't know if you want to respond to this one.
Harry, I don't really. All I can say is what I've read in the newspapers, which was there was quite a dip at first because there was still the other side. The one was cash, if I remember. They still had to pay $100 cash or something. So there was then a big blockage again. But I don't know if it's since have been sorted out.
Thank you, Yolanda. And there's another question. Salamina, since the launch of Border Management Agency, has there been any changes in terms of the efficiency and turnaround time from the South African side?
Is this now the Cross-Border Management Agency, I take it?
Border Management Agency, yeah, that's correct.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not too sure. I know the drivers. I saw the driver when I was there actually at the building. I saw a lot of people come in and give in papers and everything there, but I'm not too sure about the turnaround times. One will have
I
to
think
ask
it's a
them or
good
just-
opportunity for us to have them again presented at Transport Forum in one of our future sessions. So thank you for that question. I see Papa Lelo. You're welcome to unmute and ask your question.
Thank you, Harry. My question is to Anton. So I just wanted to find out, we've seen in various articles how everyone is sort of fearing AI, and it's been cited as it's going to take over a lot of people's roles, etc. Do you think there is something that we can do in the country to create an awareness of AI, to shape it, as you had said, that as opposed to it being a replacement of roles, it's more a transition in roles? How do you think that this message could be easily translated to a standard SMME or just general employers that are and employees that are worried about the movement in AI and losing out on potential cost savings because of this?
Thanks for the question. And look, I don't doubt that a lot of these automation tools will affect people's jobs. I mean, as I said, we've seen it where processes have been automated and it has affected people's jobs. So it is a reality that's out there. I think, and more and more these tools are becoming more accessible. So you find even people without an IT background are able to build their own robotics and automate existing processes that they may see within their organization, as an example. It's also very easy to build, for example, OCR tools and so on, sort of with nice drag and drop, easy to use type features like that. So certainly it's a reality. I think in terms of how do we, I think it would be short-sighted to not look at those, whether you're an SME or a large corporation, because in reality, it is the way the world is going, right? So by not looking at it, you just run the risk of, becoming further behind. But certainly, I think you need to look at how you can upskill yourselves in the use of these tools, and also some of the other tools that go with it. So data analytics, understanding how you use the data that comes out of processes and so on. I think by upskilling yourself in those kind of skills will change the way, your job is, but also how you potentially look at these things. I mean, it's like any industrial or the original industrial revolution, when you went from handwriting a book out to using a printing press. It changes the way jobs, work, as opposed to destroying jobs. It creates jobs, but in different areas. And I think as long as you upskill yourself and keep yourself skilled in those right areas, you will be able to still and probably having more meaningful job than you had before. Thanks.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Anton. Marcela Redwaba, you're welcome to unmute.
Audible?
Yes, you are.
First question is for Yolanda. Recently, I've been doing small volumes of Chrome out of Maidenwolf. So I wanted to see if there's a possibility of going through Mozambique, but I've been to Maputo, I think 4 times already this year. The queue is very long, almost at Komati now. So is there any way of speed, or if anybody on the panel has a way of maybe speeding it up, getting it in there quicker?
Sure. Yeah, well, there is, on the back of the poor performance of Transnet, unfortunately, all the bulk cargo going to MPDC is going via trucks at the moment. But I understand there is intermodal facilities available at the border post that's now popped up on both sides. And which then tracks to there and transfers over to rail and goes through to the port. So I'm very sure it's definitely a possibility if you want to go that distance by truck and then over to rail. It will come at a premium, of course, extra cost. And also, how are you doing that, the chrome? Is it containerized or in bulk?
Maiden is containerized.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
Marcelo,
It's
if-
container also running. Yeah. Excuse
Yeah,
me.
if I can come in here, Marcelo, from learnings from the fruit industry, we expanded also and diversify where we export our product because of inefficiencies in South Africa as well, of course. And we created a good supply chain in the citrus season out of Maputo. However, you must be careful about the cost, terminal cost that side that is in dollars and not in the South African rand as well. So you need to take care of that. But from the citrus industry in South Africa, close to the production or the citrus production, close to the port of Maputo, we successfully exported our product this year, and we will continue to do so in the upcoming years as well, just to mitigate any risk and challenges on our side. So it's definitely an option. I think you need to partner with good logistics companies as well, and just take care of the cost chain when exporting minerals out of Maputo.
Yes, I was actually going to come to you on the second one. I've also just got an order for oranges to Mombasa. So I've been struggling for reefer rates. The next one was reefer rates. So I'm not even sure, because there was a gentleman, I think 2 years back from CMA CGM. He was in this group as well. I just lost contact with him. But I've been trying to move these oranges for quite some time. Then I've ended up handing it over to another colleague of mine who's more knowledgeable in the area. But I wanted to tap into it again next. Prepare myself to be in a better position to be able to move to that region again. So I'm just struggling with the reefer rates and just moving the cargo from the. So
Marcelo, if I can just from advice from my side, I think your contact point will be engage with a logistics service provider regarding reefer rates. I think you're referring to John from CMA CGM, perhaps. But you're more than welcome. I can share CMA CGM's contact details as well with you. So you're more than welcome to email me. Unfortunately, we don't engage in the commercial side of things from an association perspective. But we can definitely advise to get into contact with a logistics service provider that you can sign up with and get rates from them or directly from the shipping line. And then lastly, I think it's important from an export perspective to look at the transit time when you do citrus or fruit of the complete supply chain. And not only look at the transit time of specific shipping lines. You need to look at the whole chain of what the time it takes to get to the export market, and then decide on a specific shipping service provider as such. And that goes from the point of supply to Mombasa. So just some advice and learnings from our side that you can be exporting more successfully the fruit.
Okay, thanks for that.
Thank you, Waldo. Do you have the contact details at hand to share it with him in the chat room?
Yeah, let me check quickly, Harry, and then I can come back to you.
Okay, otherwise I can connect you guys by email. But okay, it seemed to me everybody's happy now. I don't see any questions on YouTube either. All right, so ladies and gentlemen, what we're going to do is we're going to ask some closing remarks from each one of our panelists. And after that closing remarks, we're going to give them a hand and cheer them. And then we're going to do the closure, but that will include the quiz again. So you might be also the lucky winner of a box of wine sponsored by Global Trade Solutions. So hang in there. But let's have some closing remarks. First we'll have Anton, and then Werner, and then Yolanda, and then we'll have Magda. And then after the quiz, I'll ask Magda as well to close the session for us. But Anton, some closing remarks.
Thanks, Harry. I think from my side, it was interesting to see how, across all the speakers, I think there were similar topics that came up, and I think that's, testament to the fact that, there's some very real challenges that cut across different industries around this. So things like infrastructure we spoke about, the economy and route to market, and obviously in my talk, around digitization and AEO came up as sort of consistent themes across the various different presenters. So I think, these are factors that one needs to look at from an exporter's perspective. So I think that would be my sort of takeaway of some of the key sort of topics that have come across or come up across multiple of the speakers. But other than that, thanks very much for the opportunity to present, and very much enjoyed the session. Thank you.
Thank you, Anton. Most appreciated. Werner.
Yes, first of all, thank you, Harry. Like I said, I think it's an incredible platform to share information and just enrich ourselves. But from my side, I think as South Africans, we are extremely resilient. I think that shows in all the challenges that are coming our way. And some of the speakers spoke about challenges as well, and myself, my whole presentation was about challenges. But it just shows how resilient we are as South Africans, and I think that no one can take away from us. And we're still delivering world-class services and exporting world-class skills, products, and services. So I think from my side, we need to look at the encouraging factors, the opportunities as well, not look into the challenges as per se and focus only on that. And I think from a South African perspective, we need to do more of processing our manufacturing goods and fruit as well. That's agro-processing. And we need to start to do that more and create more valuable products on this side and export them as exporting raw materials. But yes, to sum it up, I think we're a resilient bunch, and we should focus on a brighter future.
Thank you, Werner. Indeed, we are, and you as an association is contributing tremendously to that resilience of our industry. Thank you so much, Werner. Yolanda.
Oh, no, thanks, Harry, and all the rest. Yes. Also, just what would I say, mirroring what everybody else is saying, there was definitely a lot of touch points that we all experience, whether it's be infrastructure problems or the bottlenecks that we've got or everything. So, yeah, we must just all take hands and work towards the same endpoint together. And as Werner said, we are so resilient across Africa. So, yeah. Let's do it. And it was just amazing to see, Martha, how far your GTS has gone with that AEO and everything. It's awesome. Well done.
Thank you, Yolanda, indeed. Martha.
Thank you very much, Harry. Yeah, and thank you very much again for the opportunity to host the event. Yeah, I think as we say, summarizing the event today, it's really breaking down those barriers, participating in what's available, applying the right pressure where there's a recognition in countries and supporting that to the fullest. Because, yeah, that's the only time, to Sabila's question, is how can we expedite and speed up the processes and the movement of cargo between two places, and that's really the collaboration between all these parties. So yeah, so we look forward to participate and to continue to participate in this journey. Werner, you also running quite or participating in a very important project at the Mozambican borders. So yeah, it is important that we do drive that change and support those changes and put the pressure where it belongs, because we need to get the infrastructure, procedures, processes in place and the recognition in place to break down these challenges. So yeah, thank you very much. That's it for me.
Thank you, Martha. Ladies and gentlemen, let's give our panel a big hand. What a great panel. And thank you very much for your contributions. We really appreciate that. So, ladies and gents, let me just share the screen quickly. All right, so that's the end of our program. So you can see there, now we've got the spring quiz number 2 and the closure. And so what we're going to do now is we're going to ask the question, and you might be the winner of this lucky quiz. And obviously, should you be an employee of the relevant company, then don't answer the question. So now I have to look at the chat room. I'm getting myself ready this side. And here is the question. And let's see who's answering this right the first person. So it is said, this gold sponsor of the Transport Forum, they have innovative solutions transforming the global supply chain, consulting and strategy, software solutions, specialized services. Marcella, okay, let's give Marcella, you already won a prize, so congratulations. Let's see, Michael Hennen, you're the winner of the prize. So, Michael Hennen, congratulations. Audrey Hennen from Global Trade Solution will be in contact with you, and then she will determine your preference of wine. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. I'm going to give our host, Magda, opportunity to have the last word and just close the session for us. Please remember that the 12th of October is the Transport Month celebrations. It's a hybrid event, in other words, a live audience and a Zoom audience, and it will be at the Rand Park Golf Club in the Rand Park Ridge. Beautiful area, beautiful clubhouse. And the theme for the event is going to be Q Vidus public transport. Many exhibitions there as well that you can visit. And we can only take about 120 people at that venue. So make sure that you book your seat soonest. But yeah, thank you very much for joining. And Magda, please close the session for us.
Thank you very much, Harry, and thank you for the Transport Forum to bringing us all together and making sure that these collaborations happen. Yeah, thank you for a very insightful session, and I think we've said and we've summarized the session quite well between all the speakers today. So yeah, so good luck with the journey, and yeah, look forward to the next event. So thank you very much, Harry.
Thank you
and
so
all
much.
colleagues.
Yes. Cheers, everybody. Take care.
Enjoy the wine, the winner.